Chapter 1679. Under everyone's gaze, Yunyao slowly walked to Ji Tianqing and stood in front of him. If it were any other woman, they would definitely be shy in such a situation. However, Yunyao would not. She looked calm, and her temperament was as holy and pure as ever. She stood face to face with Ji Tianqing. Their eyes met, and there was a strong sense of intimacy and longing in their eyes. "Tianqing, I've made you suffer." She took the initiative to reach out her white and tender hands and held Ji Tianqing's palm. Even if Ji Tianqing did not say it, she could guess that Ji Tianqing must have suffered a lot in the past year. He had grown so fast and become so outstanding. He must have experienced a lot of dangers and hardships. Yunyao understood and had always been worried about Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing stared at her, shook his head gently, and said in a sincere tone, "Today, I can see you again. Everything is worth it." Yunyao's body trembled, and the softest part of her heart was touched. Suddenly, she had mixed feelings. She felt sorry for him and blamed herself. If other people heard it, they would not feel much. They would only think that it was a sweet talk between ordinary lovers. However, this simple sentence contained too many twists and turns. Only Ji Tianqing and Yunyao could understand it. The two of them looked at each other affectionately, slowly opened their arms, and hugged each other tightly. They whispered softly, telling each other about their worries and longing. The breath and warmth of each other's breath were the best comfort. At this moment, they only had each other in their eyes and hearts. They ignored everyone on the ancient viewing platform. Invisibly, the atmosphere on the ancient viewing platform became very warm and romantic. Not only did the expressions and eyes of the people change, but even the gray clouds in the sky seemed to dissipate. Granny Long looked at Ji Tianqing and Yunyao with a smile and said with emotion, "I never thought that the husband that Yunyao has been worried and longing for is Ji Tianqing. That's great. She has finally fulfilled her greatest wish and reunited with her husband." Women were often more emotional than men. Even though Granny Long had lived for 2,000 years and had experienced too many ups and downs in her life, she had long become indifferent to life. However, she was also a kind-hearted person. When she was young, she had also suffered from lovesickness because of a relationship. In the end, her lover died. The pain of loving each other but not being able to stay together had tormented her for many years. Now, she witnessed the reunion of Yunyao and Ji Tianqing with her own eyes. Of course, she was touched by the scene and was filled with emotions. She could feel the deep love between Ji Tianqing and Yunyao. She was happy for them and wished them well. The Great Protector nodded in agreement and said with a smile, "In the past, I was still thinking, which woman could be worthy of a monstrous genius like Ji Tianqing? Now, I finally have an answer. Only a beautiful woman like Yunyao would be a good match for Ji Tianqing. These two little fellows are truly a perfect match." Granny Long and the Great Protector were filled with gratification. They were happy for Ji Tianqing and Yunyao. However, Protector Yan's mood was a little complicated. He remained silent and did not say anything. Ji Tianqing was the #1 god's disciple in the vast god nation, and Yunyao was the #1 god's disciple in the Luo Shui god nation. And these two people were husband and wife. This was not good news for the Heavens End god nation. The dozen or so god's disciples gradually calmed down. Seeing Ji Tianqing and Yunyao hugging each other intimately, many people were envious and wished them well. Everyone could see that Ji Tianqing and Yunyao's relationship was very deep. They must be a couple who had gone through thick and thin together. A few god's disciples were envious of Yunyao for having such a monstrous and powerful husband like Ji Tianqing. Many god's disciples were envious of their strong relationship. They were a talented man and a beautiful woman. They were a good match. In their eyes, Ji Tianqing had not only obtained glory and the right to enter the ruins of God, but also had such a beautiful wife like Yunyao. His life was already perfect. A few people secretly sighed. If they could reach Ji Tianqing's level, they would be satisfied in this life. Soon, 15 minutes passed. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao finally let go of their hands and temporarily separated. although both of them had a lot to say in their hearts. It was really inconvenient on the ancient viewing platform in front of so many people. The two of them suppressed those words in their hearts and slowly talked about it in the future. Ji Tianqing held Yun Yao's hand and said gently, "Yao Yao, wait for me here. I'll go to the ruins of God and come out to reunite with you." "Okay." Yun Yao nodded and said with concern, "I'll wait for you here. The ruins of God are mysterious. You must be careful. Don't worry. Nothing will happen." Ji Tianqing smiled, then turned around and walked into the sky. He walked in the air and reached 1,000 feet in the sky in 3 steps. He walked to the messenger of the ruins of God. "Thank you, messenger of the ruins of God." He bowed to the messenger of the ruins of God and thanked him. The messenger of the ruins of God nodded silently and turned around to enter the colorful light gate. Ji Tianqing didn't say anything and followed him into the light gate. Swish! A light flashed and Ji Tianqing and the old man of the ruins of God disappeared. Then, the colorful light gate also disappeared and the sky became calm again. The old man of the ruins of God disappeared and the invisible pressure between heaven and earth suddenly disappeared. On the ancient viewing platform, the 3 experts and more than 10 God disciples heaved a sigh of relief. No one wanted to leave. They stayed on the ancient viewing platform and whispered to each other. The mysteriousness and power of the old man of the ruins of God made everyone amazed and curious. Some people were also talking about Ji Tianqing and asking about his background and deeds. Ji Tianqing only saw a light flash in front of his eyes and then he came to another space. He followed behind the old man of the ruins of God and landed on a bleak and gray wasteland. The ground was grayish-brown hard soil and the surrounding dozens of miles was flat and covered with gravel. There was no green at all. This wasteland was like a huge Gobi desert, filled with a deathly aura. The sky was also gray and covered with thick gray clouds and fog. Even the whistling cold wind couldn't blow away the clouds and fog. The air was cold and there was an invisible divine power in the air, which was quite mysterious. Ji Tianqing always felt that this space was like Kenshin's tomb, a place of death. The old man of the ruins of God walked in front and led him across the wasteland toward a dark mountain range. Ji Tianqing followed behind him and silently observed the surroundings. He thought to himself, is this the real ruins of God? It seems to be in another alternate space. The real ruins of God used to be the world of the gods and now it has become a cemetery for the gods. I wonder where the old man of the ruins of God is taking me? When this thought flashed through his mind, the old man of the ruins of God suddenly spoke. This is the real ruins of God and can also be called the cemetery of the gods. This space is located in the deepest part of the ruins of God and is hidden deep underground. It connects to the sky and the underworld. Chapter 1680. Old Man Godly Ruin's voice was low and solemn, filled with the vicissitudes of life. Ji Tianqing immediately thought of the 9 heavens platform in the depths of the East Sea. He increasingly felt that the 9 heavens platform and the ancient gazing platform were somewhat similar. However, he did not ask about this matter and instead began to casually chat with Old Man Godly Ruins. "Senior, the Godly Ruins is the cemetery of the gods. Countless ancient gods are buried here. How many years have you been guarding the Godly Ruins?" Old Man Godly Ruins shook his head and said indifferently, "It's been too long." This old man can no longer remember clearly. However, this old man was unable to take the final step and could not escape the end of my lifespan of 10,000 years. Ji Tianqing immediately understood what he meant and guessed that he had been guarding this place for thousands of years, but not more than 10,000 years. The two of them remained silent as they continued to travel through the wasteland. At the end of the wasteland was a pitch-black ancient mountain range. Under the gray sky, the mountain range spanning hundreds of miles was like a sleeping dragon lying on the vast earth. An ancient aura of vicissitudes came from the mountain range. Ji Tianqing guessed that the ancient black mountain range might be the place where the gods were buried. A moment later, Old Man Godly Ruins led him across the wasteland and arrived at the foot of the pitch-black mountain range. Old Man Godly Ruins stopped and looked at the towering mountain range in front of him. He calmly said, "This mountain range is the cemetery of the gods. From ancient times until now, all the gods of this world would leave behind a tomb here after they died." Ji Tianqing immediately frowned, a trace of surprise flashing through his eyes. He did not understand why the gods of this world would leave behind a tomb here after they died. However, he keenly sensed that this cemetery was definitely not simple. It was very likely that it contained a great secret. He raised his head to look at the pitch-black mountain range and saw that on the undulating hills, there were numerous tombs and stone steles. From the foot of the mountain to the top, there were tombs of all sizes. Moreover, the tombs near the foot of the mountain were generally smaller and looked more ordinary. The closer the mausoleum was to the peak of the mountain, the more imposing the construction was, and the taller the stone tablets were. Ji Tianqing noticed this and thought to himself, could it be that the tombs in the mausoleum are also arranged according to strength? The gods near the foot of the mountain are ordinary gods. The closer to the top of the mountain, the more powerful the gods buried there are. Old Man Godly Ruins glanced at him and explained, since ancient times, the gods have all been buried in this cemetery. Try climbing this mountain range and see if you can reach the peak. In some of the tombs, there was still the aura of the gods, or the inheritance of the gods. You have to use your heart to sense it. If you are lucky enough, you will have a chance to obtain the power or inheritance of the gods. If you really have no fate with those gods, this old man will give you a red fruit to help you improve your talent and divine soul. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing finally understood. No wonder those geniuses who had entered the ruins of God in the past had all obtained great gains. Many geniuses later became experts whose names shook the continent. He thought for a moment and asked Old Man Godly Ruins, "Senior, may I ask if anyone has reached the peak of the mountain in the past few thousand years?" Old Man Godly Ruins shook his head and said with a lonely expression, "There are only a few tombs at the peak of the mountain, but they are the most powerful gods that have ever appeared in this world. Unfortunately, after several thousand years, no one has reached the peak." Ji Tianqing frowned and asked, could it be that they were not strong enough? Or that they did not grasp any methods or tricks? Old Man Godly Ruins shook his head again and said faintly, "It has nothing to do with strength or methods. The cemetery of the gods is the greatest secret in the world. Even this old man cannot reach the peak of the mountain, let alone see all the tombs. Everything here depends on the word opportunity." Ji Tianqing nodded to show that he understood and cupped his hands to Old Man Godly Ruins to thank him. Old Man Godly Ruins nodded slightly and said, "This old man will wait for you here. You only have one day, go." Ji Tianqing did not say anything else. After nodding, he turned and walked towards the pitch-black mountain range. The terrain at the foot of the mountain was relatively flat, and the closer one got to the peak, the steeper the terrain became. Ji Tianqing had just stepped onto the pitch-black mountain range when he felt a formless, majestic force pressing down from the sky and enveloping him. This formless force was as heavy as a mountain and firmly suppressed him, making it impossible for him to fly. The magic power in his body seemed to have solidified and could not be used. Even moving his feet became somewhat strenuous, and his walking speed was no different from a mortal's. A moment later, he walked a few hundred steps along the foot of the mountain and arrived in front of the nearest tomb. This tomb was only 30 meters wide and was a black mound that was more than 10 meters tall. It was surrounded by a circle of black rocks, and in front of the tomb stood a tombstone that was more than 10 meters tall. Several rows of dark red words were engraved on the black tombstone. Martial god Tianlong came from Shenwu Continent's Frost Empire. He spent his entire life fighting in Shenwu Continent and created the Tianlong Divine Kingdom. He died in the 21,860th year of the Shenwu calendar at the age of 9,852 years old. He died of old age. After reading the words on the tombstone, Ji Tianqing frowned slightly and thought to himself, was this Tianlong martial god one of the weakest martial gods in the graveyard of the gods? According to the historical records of Shenwu Continent, he died more than 8,100 years ago. According to the historical records, there was indeed a Tianlong Empire on Shenwu Continent, but it fell apart 8,000 years ago. It seems that this Tianlong martial god was unable to ascend to the higher realms and was unable to escape the great limit of 10,000 years. In the end, he died with regret. Ji Tianqing sighed in his heart and continued walking. He did not want to waste time sensing this tomb, nor did he want to obtain Tianlong martial god's power or inheritance. After all, Tianlong martial god was one of the weakest deities and held no attraction for him. Over the next 2 hours, Ji Tianqing walked more than 10,000 steps with great difficulty and finally reached the halfway point of the mountain. In the process, he saw more than 80 tombs along the way. Almost all the tombs had a martial god realm expert buried in them. Among the 80 martial gods, there were ancient martial gods from 30,000 years ago and more recent ones that had fallen a few thousand years ago. Most of the martial gods did not have any outstanding achievements, nor did they leave behind any legends. They were very mediocre. After all, none of these martial gods had been able to ascend to the higher realms. From birth to death, they had always been on Jianghu continent, and it was very difficult for them to leave behind any shocking legends. Ji Tianqing roughly looked around and ignored the tombs as he continued to climb to the peak. However, he could clearly feel that the invisible pressure was getting stronger. His physical strength was rapidly depleting, and his face turned pale as he began to pant. His footsteps became unsteady, and every step took a lot of effort. However, he gritted his teeth and persevered, walking step by step towards the peak. Chapter 1681. Before coming to the ruins of God, Ji Tianqing had learned about the legends of the ruins of God. From then on, he had an idea. He wanted to enter the ruins of God and see if there were any Kenshin tombs. The old man of the ruins of God had told him that any god that was born in this world would leave behind a tomb after they died. This made him even more determined, and he could not wait to verify it. Rustle. 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 Ji Tianqing lowered his head and hunched his back as he climbed up the mountain with difficulty. Soon, he arrived in front of a black tomb. This tomb was clearly larger than the battle god tombs from before, and its aura was even more ancient and majestic. The black tomb was 100 meters wide and was built from thousands of giant black stones. In front of the tomb, there was not only an altar, but also a tombstone that was 30 meters tall. Ji Tianqing stared at the tombstone and read the rows of gray-white ancient characters. Yu Liumiao came from an ancient clan in the Jianghu continent, the Qianlu clan. He became a god in 3,000 years and ascended to the higher realms, where he was bestowed the title of true god. During the ancient War of the Gods, he led the Qianlu clan's martial gods and warriors to fight against the demons. In the end, Yu Liumiao and the 300 warriors of the Qianlu clan all died in the ancient War of the Gods. After reading the ancient characters on the tombstone, Ji Tianqing frowned, and his expression became solemn. In his heart, he naturally felt a sense of respect for him. No wonder this tomb can be located halfway up the mountain. It's clearly different from the other battle god tombs. This was an ancient god that surpassed the martial god realm and ascended to the higher realms to become a true god. During the ancient war, this true god led the tribe's people and powerhouses to fight without any regard for their own safety. In the end, all of them died in battle. Such a touching experience is indeed worthy of the respect of the future generations. Ji Tianqing bowed to Yu Liumiao's tomb to express his respect. After all, he had led the humans of the Tianxian continent to fight to the death against the demons' invasion. After a while, Ji Tianqing focused his mind and began to use his heart to sense the tomb. He tried to use his mind to communicate with the tomb of the god of sin. He wanted to see if there were any remnants of Yu Liugao's power or inheritance in the tomb. This was the first time he had attempted to communicate with the tomb of the gods ever since he had entered the mausoleum of the gods. At first, he felt that the tomb of the god of sin was cold and gloomy, and it was filled with the aura of loneliness and death. But a quarter of an hour later, his mind suddenly sensed an obscure fluctuation hidden in the depths of the divine tomb. It was an extremely cold and concealed fluctuation of divine power. Unfortunately, after 30,000 years, that divine power was already very weak. Ji Tianqing sensed for a while and sensed that the divine power was about to dissipate, so he simply gave up. The facts proved that the old man of the divine ruins was right. There were indeed remnants of divine power or divine Tao inheritances in some divine tombs. However, Ji Tianqing did not intend to refine that weak divine power. He left Yu Liugao's tomb and continued to climb to the top of the mountain. Time passed silently. His body became more and more crooked, and his footsteps became more and more staggered. Moving became more and more difficult. However, he relied on his strong willpower to stubbornly hold on. A full 8 hours had passed, but he had only taken 8,000 steps and passed by a dozen or so ancient tombs. Almost all of the tombs had ancient gods buried in them, and they had all ascended to the upper realm. Moreover, these gods all had the titles of True God and Celestial God. Ji Tianqing did not waste any more energy on sensing the tomb of the god of sin. He stared at the grandest tombs on the top of the mountain and slowly climbed closer and closer. The old man of the divine ruin still stood at the base of the mountain. Under the black cloak, his turbid eyes opened and stared at Ji Tianqing's figure. This kid doesn't care about the martial god's tomb or the true god's tomb. He clearly communicated with a true god's tomb before, but he gave up on refining divine power. What does he want to do? Could it be that he already has a goal and wants to reach the summit? The old man of the divine ruins silently muttered, a hint of anticipation flashing through his turbid eyes. In the past 3,000 years, 9 geniuses have entered the divine ruins, but only 2 were able to reach halfway up the mountain. The woman from 2,000 years ago could only come into contact with the true god's tomb and refine the divine power of an ancient true god. This kid Ji Tianqing is even more outstanding than that woman. He can actually come into contact with the true god's tomb. He still wants to climb to the summit, but this old man has guarded the divine ruins for thousands of years, and no one has been able to reach the summit. I don't know if he can create a miracle. Thinking of this, the old man of the divine ruins' eyes became deeper and more dazzling. In the cemetery of the gods, there was a deathly silence. Only Ji Tianqing's panting and heavy footsteps could be heard in the cemetery. A full 12 hours passed. He was about to reach the summit and was still a few dozen steps away from the huge black tomb. At this time, he was almost exhausted and his face was as pale as paper. He was sweating profusely, his clothes and robes drenched, and his hair was a bit messy. Huff. Huff. Huff, he panted violently, lowered his head, and moved his feet towards the tomb. The distance between the two continued to shrink. 80 steps, 70 steps, 60 steps. Half an hour later, Ji Tianqing crossed a few hurdles with difficulty and flipped over a protruding rock bush before finally arriving in front of the tomb. This was close to the highest point of the cemetery. Ji Tianqing looked around and saw that there were only 4 divine tombs of this size on the entire mountain peak. There was no doubt that the god buried in this tomb was one of the most powerful gods. However, when he saw the tomb of the gods clearly, he was stunned on the spot. He had originally thought that an ancient god was buried in this tomb and that it had a history of more than 30,000 years. However, upon closer inspection, he discovered that this tomb was not that old, and it did not have an ancient aura. Compared to the tombs of the true gods halfway up the mountain, this tomb seemed very new, and was clearly a tomb from the modern era. A god that can be buried here must be stronger than a sky god. Aside from Kenshin, when did such a powerhouse appear in the Jianghu continent in the past few thousand years? Could this be Kenshin's tomb? Ji Tianqing was full of doubts, but he still felt a trace of anticipation as he looked at the 150-meter-tall stone tablet. There were a few lines of large golden words carved into the tablet. White Dragon, from the heaven and divine nation, was born in the 26,520th year of the Jianghu calendar. The first half of his life was ordinary. In the 28,500th year of the Jianghu calendar, he followed his master, Kenshin, and ascended to the higher realms. 450 years later, he was conferred the title of White Dragon God. 500 years later, he fell in a battle between gods. When Ji Tianqing finished reading the few lines of words, his eyes widened. His face was filled with shock and astonishment. He had never imagined that a god that had fallen 1,000 years ago would be buried in this modern tomb. Chapter 1682. Ji Tianqing stood stiffly in front of the tomb with a complicated expression. After a long silence, he took a deep breath and suppressed the shock in his heart. In his mind, he called out with his divine sense, "Burial of heaven. Wake up quickly, I have something important to ask you." After a while, Burial of Heaven's voice sounded in his mind. "What is it? Have you heard of the White Dragon God?" Ji Tianqing asked in a strange tone. Burial of Heaven was silent for a while, then said with a sudden realization, "Oh, are you talking about Little White?" "What Little White?" Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment, then he pointed to the huge tombstone and said, "I saw a tomb in the ruins of God. It belonged to the White Dragon God." It was clearly written on the tombstone that the White Dragon God worshipped Kenshin as his master and ascended to the upper realm with Kenshin. He even became the White Dragon God. Hearing this, Burial of Heaven's tone was a little emotional, and he slowly explained, "The White Dragon God is just his title, very few people call him that. Kenshin and I, as well as those people back then, all call him Little White, or Steward Bai." "Steward Bai?" Ji Tianqing frowned again and asked in confusion, "What do you mean? Is he Kenshin's steward?" "Of course." Burial of Heaven said without hesitation. Little White shamelessly pestered Kenshin and insisted on following Kenshin. He even wanted to die to be Kenshin's servant. Later, this kid claimed to be Kenshin's steward, but Kenshin was too lazy to explain and just let him be. Ji Tianqing looked at the tombstone with a stunned face. He couldn't believe the dark golden words. He was truly unable to associate an extremely powerful divine lord with a shameless brat. After a moment of silence, he asked with his divine sense, "Burial of Heaven, can you explain what's going on?" Burial of Heaven thought for a moment and explained, "My memory is a little fragmented, I can't remember many things clearly, I can only remember a little. Back then, Kenshin opened a dojo at Jianghu Mountain and challenged all the martial saints in the world. One day, a brat who called himself the White Dragon Sword Saint arrogantly barged into the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and wanted to challenge the Sword God. Later on, the Sword God defeated that brat in 2 moves. That brat was subdued by the Sword God's supreme sword Dao. He was so shocked that he refused to leave the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. He pestered the Sword God all day long, asking him to take him as his disciple. The Sword God said that he wouldn't accept any disciples, so he shamelessly insisted on being a servant. The Sword God ordered people to chase him down the mountain, and he knelt outside the Sword God's room for 9 days and 9 nights. Later on, that brat became the Sword God's follower and considered himself a butler. After hearing Burial of Heaven's words, Ji Tianqing had a strange expression on his face. He looked at the tomb of the god of sin and the tombstone again. "I didn't expect that this divine Lord White Dragon had such an interesting story." Burial of Heaven added solemnly, "However, Little White's loyalty to Kenshin is unquestionable. He is also Kenshin's right-hand man. This kid is actually a peerless genius. His talent can be said to be top-notch. However, before he met Kenshin, he could only activate 20% of his talent and potential by himself. It was Kenshin who helped him activate all his potential. That was why he could become a divine lord in just a few hundred years. Unfortunately, in the end, he was killed by a scoundrel in order to protect Kenshin." Sigh. Buried Heaven heaved a heavy sigh at the end of his speech. Ji Tianqing's heart was also heavy. He hurriedly asked, "Burial of Heaven, Kenshin, you and the divine Lord White Dragon, what happened in the upper realm? Didn't Kenshin become the divine king of the Milky Way? Why did he still die?" Burial of Heaven was silent for a moment, then said in a low voice, "I haven't recovered my memories of the upper realm. There are only some scattered images, and I can't describe them clearly. Now is not the time to discuss this. Let's talk about it in the future." After that, Burial of Heaven was silent. He seemed to have fallen into a deep slumber. Ji Tianqing couldn't ask any more questions. He could only suppress his doubts in his heart. He looked at the divine Lord White Dragon's tomb with a burning gaze and cupped his hands. Then, he began to use his mind to communicate with the divine Lord White Dragon's tomb. "The divine Lord White Dragon was Kenshin's servant, and I am Kenshin's successor. If he left behind any divine power or inheritance, I should be able to sense it, right? Moreover, He died 1,000 years ago, so it's not that long ago. If he left behind any divine power or inheritance, it should be more powerful and beneficial to me. Ji Tianqing thought to himself. He tried his best to control his mind and communicate with the divine Lord White Dragon's tomb. Time passed silently. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. After countless attempts, Ji Tianqing finally found something. His mind sensed a weak soul fluctuation in the depths of the divine Lord White Dragon's tomb. It's actually a soul fluctuation? And not a divine power aura? Ji Tianqing immediately frowned, and a glint flashed across his eyes. Could it be that the divine Lord White Dragon didn't leave behind any divine power or inheritance, but a remnant soul? He hurriedly used his mind to approach the soul fluctuation. He patiently communicated with it and silently observed. A moment later, he was finally sure. That weak energy was a remnant soul. This discovery made Ji Tianqing pleasantly surprised. It really is the remnant soul of the divine Lord White Dragon. That's great. For a powerful god like him, even if he had fallen, he would still be able to retain a trace of his soul. As long as there is a remnant soul, there is hope for rebirth. Thus, Ji Tianqing did his best to release his mind to wrap around the remnant soul and slowly move it out of the divine Lord White Dragon's tomb. This process was very slow and difficult. It was extremely taxing on the mind. Ji Tianqing used a full 2 hours to move the remnant soul out of the divine Lord White Dragon's tomb. Whoosh! A ball of pale white light flew out of the divine Lord White Dragon's tomb and landed in front of Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing's mind was exhausted to the extreme, and his physical strength was almost exhausted. He immediately sat on the ground, panting heavily. Even so, he stared at the ball of white light in front of him with a gratified smile on his face. White Dragon, oh White Dragon, you are lucky enough to meet me, don't worry, I will find a way to help you rebirth. After saying that, Ji Tianqing rummaged through his space ring for a while and found an exquisite golden jade bottle. This palm-sized jade bottle was one of the gifts Hongqing Tian gave him. It was called the glazed bottle. Although it was just an empty bottle, it was a powerful tribulation-level magic treasure. It could store magic power, primordial spirit, and all kinds of strange things. Ji Tianqing cast a spell to open the glazed bottle. It released a dense white light and sucked in the remnant soul of the divine Lord White Dragon. The remnant soul of the divine Lord White Dragon did not have any consciousness. Of course, it would not resist and was immediately put into the glazed bottle. Chapter 1683. After leaving the White Dragon God's tomb, Ji Tianqing continued to climb to the peak. About 3,000 meters away, there was an equally majestic black tomb. At this point, Ji Tianqing had already reached the peak, and the pressure he was enduring was even more terrifying. His physical strength was already exhausted, and he was constantly overdrawing his potential. His mind was also extremely tired. The formless pressure made it impossible for him to straighten his back, and he could only lower his head and move his feet while drenched in sweat. He would not give up until he saw Kenshin's tomb. After 2 whole hours, he finally managed to walk the distance of 3,000 feet and arrived at the foot of the divine mausoleum. The black tomb was 300 meters wide, and it exuded an ancient and majestic aura. Ji Tianqing observed it for a moment and discovered that the soil and rocks of the tomb were covered with traces of time. It was obvious that this was an ancient tomb that had at least 30,000 years of history. On the 150-meter-tall black tombstone, there were a few lines of dark golden ancient words that had long since faded. Ji Tianqing carefully observed them for a long time before he could recognize them. The seven-eyed divine lord was one of the ancient human sages. He was born in Jianghu continent, and his life is unknown. After the War of the Gods, the seven-eyed divine lord appeared out of nowhere and used his invincible might to exterminate countless demons, leading the human race to counterattack. In the end, the seven-eyed divine lord did not hesitate to sacrifice himself and perish together with his enemies. He fell at the end of the War of the Gods. After reading the introduction of the tomb owner, Ji Tianqing's eyes flashed with disappointment. What disappointed him was not the seven-eyed divine lord's experience, but that this tomb did not belong to Kenshin. He did not waste any time trying to sense the tomb of the seven-eyed Divine Lord. After turning around and leaving, he continued to walk towards the peak. There were 2 more tombs on the peak. One was to the right, about 5,000 meters away. The other was in the middle of the peak, about 3,000 meters away. The middle tomb stood at the highest point of the peak, and it was also the tomb that occupied the most space in the mausoleum and had the most sacred and majestic aura. Ji Tianqing pondered for a moment and decided to check out the tomb on the right. It was merely a distance of over 500 feet, but it took him more than an hour to walk. His strength was severely overdrawn. His eyes had already turned black, and he was seeing stars. His breathing was also extremely heavy. Even his thoughts and consciousness started to become muddled and blurry. Shah. Shah Shah. Finally, he arrived near the divine tomb. From more than 100 feet away, he raised his head with difficulty and observed the tomb of the god of sin. Gray-brown rocks and hard soil piled up to form this ancient and plain tomb. A vast and boundless aura emanated from the tomb of the god of sin, as if it had brought him back to the ancient times. After a few glances, he was able to determine that this was an ancient tomb with a history of more than 30,000 years. Sure enough, there were a few rows of dark golden ancient characters inscribed on the pitch-black tombstone. Heavenly Wolf Divine Lord, one of the ancient demon sages. He was born in the profound sky continent and died at the end of the Great War of the Gods. When he saw this, Ji Tianqing felt even more disappointed. To think that another ancient god would fall in the Great War of the Gods, he turned to leave the Heavenly Wolf Divine Lord's tomb and looked at the tomb of the god of sin at the highest point of the mountain. Could it be that the most sacred and majestic tomb is the tomb of Kenshin? If that really is the tomb of Kenshin, then what's the difference between it and my Kenshin Yin-Yang tomb? As this thought flashed through his mind, a deep sense of expectation welled up in his heart. He moved his feet with difficulty and inched toward the tomb of the god of sin. The short distance of over 10,000 feet was like an insurmountable moat to him. This section of the road was covered with fine stones, which were formed after the ancient rocks weathered and scattered on the ground. There were also many large rocks and dozens of ravines and holes. Normally, these obstacles would not have affected Ji Tianqing. Even mortals who did not practice martial arts would be able to easily cross it. However, Ji Tianqing's strength was almost exhausted. He was on the verge of unconsciousness and collapse. He almost closed his eyes and staggered as he inched forward. Like a baby who had just learned how to walk, after tripping over a ravine, he found it difficult to stand up and could only continue to crawl forward. When he could no longer crawl, he lay on the ground and rested for a moment. After recovering some strength, he continued to crawl forward. Incomparably tenacious willpower tenaciously supported him. He clenched his teeth and refused to give up. At the foot of the mountain, the old man of sin quietly watched all of this. At the beginning, when he saw Ji Tianqing reach the summit, he was rather gratified and excited. After all, Ji Tianqing had created a miracle and successfully reached the summit. He had reached a height that no one had reached in thousands of years. The old man of sin was also looking forward to seeing what Ji Tianqing would gain. But now, Ji Tianqing had exhausted all his strength and was on the verge of collapse and unconsciousness. But he was still tenaciously holding on. Even if he had to crawl, he still had to slowly climb to the summit. Even the old man of sin, whose heart was as calm as water, could not help but be moved. A complicated look appeared in his turbid eyes. There was admiration, shock, and a strong sense of doubt. What kind of belief has supported him until now? What goal has made him risk everything to reach the summit? The old man of sin could not guess or understand. He could only quietly wait for the results to appear. About 4 hours later, Ji Tianqing finally walked the distance of more than 10,000 feet and arrived at the sacred tomb of the god of sin on the mountain peak. At this time, he was already covered in blood and mud, and his hair and clothes were in a mess. His skin and flesh had been cut by the sharp rocks on the ground, and he was covered in crisscrossing wounds from which blood flowed. But he could no longer feel pain, and his eyes were covered by blood, sweat, and mud. He lay on the ground panting for a long time before he struggled to support his body and stand up little by little. This place was located at the highest point of the mountain and was also the core of the cemetery of the gods. The tomb in front of him covered an area of 9,000 feet and was even larger than a divine palace. The pitch-black stone tablet in front of the tomb was 1,000 feet tall. Without a doubt, the god buried in this tomb was definitely the leader of the gods. Ji Tianqing raised his head with difficulty, opened his blurry eyes, and looked up at the huge tombstone. He looked at it for a long time before he could clearly see the ancient words on the tombstone. Divine King Nacre Light, the leader of the ancient sages, the king of the gods who dominated the galaxy and ruled over thousands of gods. Born in ancient times, legend has it that she was transformed from the Polaris star. She was born extraordinary and was born a god. Chapter 1684. Ji Tianqing looked up at the pitch-black tombstone as his expression and gaze became extremely mixed. He had never imagined that this divine tomb that stood at the peak of the mountain, the head of all gods, was actually the tomb of God King Nacre Light. It's actually not Kenshin's tomb. Kenshin was once conferred the title of God King, ruling over tens of thousands of gods. After his death, the tomb should have appeared here. But I've seen countless tombs from the foot of the mountain, but I haven't found Kenshin's tomb. What's going on here? Ji Tianqing was filled with questions, unable to understand why. However, he also understood that it was only natural that God King Nacre Light's tomb stood at the peak of the mountain and was revered as the head of all gods. After all, not only was Nacre Light the ruler of all gods, but she was also the founder of this world's civilization. Without Nacre Light's teachings and protection, who knew when the living beings of this world would gain intelligence and grasp cultivation methods? Nacre Light's contributions to this world were definitely the greatest since ancient times. After a moment of thought, Ji Tianqing roused himself and did his best to release his consciousness as he probed the Nacre Light divine tomb. He really wanted to know if Nacre Light's tomb contained any divine power or divine legacy. Nacre Light was the legendary goddess Nacre Light, known as the ruler and creator of this world. Now that goddess Nacre Light's tomb was at the peak of the mausoleum, it meant that goddess Nacre Light had indeed died. However, Yunyao had fused with the Neptunian divine pearl and become Nacre Light's reincarnation. Ji Tianqing calculated that if he could obtain goddess Nacre Light's divine power or legacy, it would definitely be extremely beneficial to Yunyao. His consciousness entered the divine tomb bit by bit, exploring deeper into the divine tomb. A full 30 minutes passed, but he did not discover anything. He did not sense any presence of divine power. Is it because too much time has passed? Even if goddess Nacre Light left behind her divine power and legacy, it has dissipated over the years? Ji Tianqing thought in doubt as he continued probing, unwilling to give up. As time passed, his consciousness became more and more blurry as he became mentally exhausted. An hour later, he finally detected a very obscure divine power aura hidden in the depths of the divine tomb. His heart was filled with joy, and he recklessly probed that aura. However, before he could find out what the aura was, he blacked out and fainted. At this point, he was already at the end of his rope. All of his strength and mind had been overdrawn. He collapsed powerlessly and slowly fell to the ground, falling unconscious. At the foot of the mountain, Old Man Godly Ruins was watching him. Seeing him fall unconscious on the ground, Old Man Godly Ruins waved his hand and shot out a dazzling golden light. Shwa! The golden light condensed into a giant palm that wrapped around Ji Tianqing and dragged him back to the front of Old Man God. Old Man Godly Ruins held up Ji Tianqing with one hand and murmured with a complicated expression, "I didn't think that this kid would create a miracle that hasn't happened in thousands of years." He was able to climb to the top of the mountain and reach the tomb of the King of Gods. Unfortunately, the one-day time limit is up. With that, Old Man Godly Ruins carried Ji Tianqing and turned to leave the cemetery of the gods. He stepped on the void, crossed the dark sky, and returned the way he came. During this process, boundless azure wood divine power surged out of his palm and poured into Ji Tianqing's body. The rich azure light contained an incomparably sacred and powerful power. After a short 100 breaths, the azure wood divine power filled Ji Tianqing's body and healed his magic power and injuries. Originally, Ji Tianqing had exhausted his strength and overdrawn his potential and mind. He would have been unconscious for 2 or 3 months, and his body and soul would have suffered indelible injuries, which would have affected his martial arts foundation and talent. However, after being repaired by the azure wood divine power, not only did he recover, his strength also quietly increased. Old Man Godly Ruins stood in the sky above the wasteland and let go of Ji Tianqing. About half a quarter of an hour later, Ji Tianqing slowly woke up. Huff, he let out a long breath and gradually opened his eyes. Waves of exhaustion and weakness came from his body and soul, making him lie in the air and not want to move. This was the after-effect of overdrawing his strength and mind, and it would take some time to subside. Ji Tianqing saw Old Man Godly Ruins in front of him and found himself floating in the sky above the wasteland. He slowly stood up. He turned his head to look at the mountain range at the end of the wasteland and awkwardly asked Old Man Godly Ruins, "Senior, is it time?" Old Man Godly Ruins nodded slightly. Ji Tianqing revealed a regretful expression and a trace of disappointment flashed through his eyes. "I have already checked the divine power in Goddess Yaoguang's tomb, but unfortunately, I fainted before I could check it out." He thought to himself that if he had the chance in the future, he would definitely come again. After all, the divine power or inheritance left behind by Goddess Yaoguang was too important to Yun Yao. He sighed with melancholy and bowed to Old Man Godly Ruins. He said in a sincere tone, "Thank you for saving me, Senior." Old Man Godly Ruins nodded and didn't say anything. He waved his hand and sent out a white light. The white light condensed into a huge door of light that floated in the sky. Old Man Godly Ruins looked at Ji Tianqing and calmly said, "Little guy, since you know that this is an abandoned world, you should have a certain understanding of ancient legends. This old man wants to know what you will do if you can reach the martial god realm in the future." Ji Tianqing didn't know why Old Man Godly Ruins asked this. But he replied without hesitation, "Naturally, I will investigate the ancient matters and do my best to find a way to break through the seal of the world." Old Man Godly Ruins calmly nodded and said, "This old man looks forward to the next time I see you, to what extent you will have grown. Follow your heart and do your best to pursue the peak of the martial path. Go." With that, he waved his hand at Ji Tianqing. "Senior, wait a moment." Ji Tianqing didn't want to leave and unwillingly asked, "Senior, I have a question and I hope you can answer it for me." "What is it?" Old Man Godly Ruins looked at him and asked in a low voice. Ji Tianqing frowned and said, "I believe you also know that 1,000 years ago, the famous Kenshin fell. Kenshin came from this world and ascended to the upper realm to become a divine king. Logically speaking, after Kenshin fell, a tomb should have appeared here and it should have been on the mountain peak. But I didn't find Kenshin's tomb on the mountain peak." Old Man Godly Ruins fell silent. After a long while, he said faintly, "If the sword god has fallen, then his tomb will definitely appear on the peak of the mountain. Since it's not on the mountain peak, it means he might not have really fallen." With that, Old Man Godly Ruins turned and flew toward the cemetery of the gods. Ji Tianqing stood in the air and frowned in confusion as he watched Old Man Godly Ruins disappear. Kenshin didn't really fall? What does that mean? Chapter 1685. Swoosh. With a flash of light, Ji Tianqing's figure disappeared and left the ruins of God. The next moment, light returned to his eyes and he was back on the ancient viewing platform. Around the ancient viewing platform, the gods' disciples of the 3 divine kingdoms had not left yet. They were divided into 3 groups and were discussing something in a low voice. Seeing Ji Tianqing suddenly appear, everyone stopped talking and looked at him in unison. Ji Tianqing is out. The one-day deadline is finally up. He really came out. I wonder what Ji Tianqing has found after entering the ruins of God. Everyone stared at Ji Tianqing expectantly and observed his changes. However, after the gods' disciples checked his strength, they were a little disappointed and confused. Strange, Ji Tianqing doesn't seem to have changed. Did he not find anything in the ruins of God? Since ancient times, there have been many geniuses who have entered the ruins of God, but not everyone has found anything. Many people have returned empty-handed. If that's the case, then we have waited for nothing. On the surface, Ji Tianqing did not seem to have changed. The green with divine power that the old man of God had transferred to him was hidden in his limbs and bones, silently nourishing and strengthening his body. With the strength of the God's disciples, they could not see the hidden divine power at all. Only the great guardian, Guardian Yan, and Granny Long could see the clues. Moreover, the three experts knew very well that Ji Tianqing most likely had found something and would not return empty-handed. However, what he had found might be divine power, divine Tao inheritance, or divine artifacts and Dharma treasures. These were all things that could not be seen at the moment. Ji Tianqing ignored the attention and discussion of the God's disciples and walked toward Yunyao. Yunyao stood quietly in the crowd and looked at Ji Tianqing gently. When Ji Tianqing stood in front of her, Yi Qing Luo, Lu Xiaomeng and the two young men all tactfully retreated. Ji Tianqing looked at Yunyao and said with a smile, "Yao Yao, I'm back. Now that the matter is settled, I can finally talk to you properly. It's good that you're safe." Yunyao looked him up and down a few times. Seeing that he was unharmed, she was relieved. "Tianqing, did you gain anything from entering the ruins of God?" Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a complicated expression, "Of course there are gains, and they are very special. But we'll talk about this later. Now, I want to discuss something with you." Yunyao nodded slightly and said gently, "Okay, go ahead." Ji Tianqing used a secret sound transmission technique and said to her, "I'm now the number one God's disciple in the vast God nation, but you're cultivating in the Luo Shui God nation. We're separated by the entire Heaven's End God nation. It wasn't easy for me to find you and finally reunite with you. I don't want to be separated from you again." Yunyao nodded and said, "Me too." Ji Tianqing smiled and asked, "Yao Yao, are you willing to leave the Luo Shui God nation and accompany me?" "Of course I am." Yunyao nodded without hesitation, but explained with a complicated expression, "But I can't leave the Luo Shui God nation yet." "Why?" Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked with concern, "Did the Luo Shui martial god restrict you in some way?" "That's not it." Yunyao shook her head and said with a complicated expression, "The Luo Shui martial god has treated me well. Moreover, it's more helpful for my cultivation if I stay in the Luo Shui God nation. In the past year, I was able to increase my strength rapidly because I awakened my talent and potential. In my mind, the memories of Goddess Yaoguang often appear." Ji Tianqing roughly understood what she meant and nodded. "In that case, it's better for you to stay in the Luo Shui God nation. What about you?" Yunyao looked worried and asked, "You're going back to the vast God nation? When can we meet again?" Ji Tianqing smiled and reached out to hold her hand. He said gently, "I'm not going back to the vast God nation. I'm going to the Luo Shui God nation with you. People say that the people of the Luo Shui God nation are the kindest. I don't think the Luo Shui God nation will reject me, right?" Yunyao was stunned for a moment, and a look of disbelief appeared on her face. She asked in surprise, "Tianqing, are you really going to follow me to the Luo Shui God nation? But how will you explain to the vast God nation? You're the number one God disciple. Will martial God Taihao allow you to leave?" Ji Tianqing shook his head and comforted her, "Don't worry. Before I came to the ruins of God, I've already talked to martial God Taihao. He has already agreed." Yunyao was relieved and nodded. "In that case, there shouldn't be a problem. It's just that you're the number one God disciple in the vast God nation and enjoy the best resources and treatment. I'm afraid that you'll be wronged when you return to the Luo Shui God nation with me." Before she could finish, Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said confidently, "With my talent and strength, how could I be wronged?" "That's true." Yunyao nodded as a proud smile appeared in her eyes. At this moment, Guardian Yen cupped his hands and bowed to Granny Long and the Great Guardian. The 5 God disciples of the Heaven End God nation were also ready, following behind Guardian Yen. Under everyone's gaze, Guardian Yen took out a flying boat. He brought the 5 gods' disciples into the flying ship and flew into the sky at lightning speed. Soon, they were far away. After the people of the Heaven End God Nation left, the Great Guardian also said goodbye to Granny Long. Then, he looked at Ji Tianqing and said loudly, "Tianqing, we should go back." Qin Sangxiong, Song Zhanyu, Wuk Yin and Jiang Ningxue all stood behind the Great Guardian and looked at Ji Tianqing quietly. Ji Tianqing turned his head and looked at everyone. He hesitated and didn't say anything. Yin Yao held his hand and said gently, "Tianqing, since you've already made your decision, go and say goodbye to them." "Okay, wait for me here." Ji Tianqing nodded and walked towards the Great Guardian. When he came in front of the Great Guardian, he said apologetically, "Great Guardian, I'm sorry. I'm afraid I can't go back to Mount God Bestowment with you." Qin Sangxiong, Wuk Yin and the others were stunned. They couldn't believe it. The Great Guardian seemed to have expected this and wasn't surprised. "Tianqing, are you really going to Luoshui God Nation to be with your wife?" Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "When I first entered Mount God Bestowment, I was looking for her. Now that my wish has been fulfilled, of course, I'll stay with her forever." Sigh. The Great Guardian sighed and said, "Tianqing, I know you're a man of character and you're loyal to your feelings. However, you're the #1 God disciple of the vast God Nation and the son of God that the God Master values the most. If you go to Luoshui God Nation, you'll lose the glory and treatment you had before. It might affect your future martial arts." Ji Tianqing smiled and said calmly, "Thank you for your concern, Great Guardian. However, I've already made up my mind. You don't have to persuade me anymore. To me, it doesn't matter where I cultivate. My martial arts future is in my own hands and I don't need to rely on external resources. My wife is my most precious other half. As long as I can be with her and protect her day and night, nothing else matters." Hearing his words, the Great Guardian, Qin Sangxiong, Song Zhanyu and the others fell silent. Everyone's expression was very complicated. They sighed for him, but at the same time, they admired him. Chapter 1686. It was only today that Jiang Ningxue realized how devoted Ji Tianqing was to his love. At this moment, she was extremely envious of Yun Yao. She was able to receive all of Ji Tianqing's love, and he was so loyal to her. This was the kind of love that Jiang Ningxue had always dreamed of. A couple for life. Together, they will live and prosper together. Perhaps, only a goddess like Yun Yao is worthy of Ji Tianqing's heart. Jiang Ningxue sighed with bitterness in her heart. The Great Guardian, Song Zhanyu, and the others all looked at Ji Tianqing with complicated expressions. They did not know what to say. Qin Sangxiong, on the other hand, was very carefree. He cupped his fists towards Ji Tianqing and smiled. "Senior brother Ji, I admire your devotion. However, if you leave like this and give me the position of the first God's disciple, will you be unhappy?" This was the first time he called Ji Tianqing senior brother. This showed that he admired Ji Tianqing from the bottom of his heart. Ji Tianqing smiled and shook his head. "I am just a passerby. You are the best candidate for the position of the first God's disciple." Wu Kei looked at him with reluctance. He cupped his fists and said, "Young Master Ji, Wu Kei will never forget the help you gave me back then. Since you have made up your mind, Wu Kei will not try to persuade you anymore. I only hope that you will be able to live a peaceful life with Miss Yun Yao after you go to the Luotian God Kingdom." Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. He reminded him, "I will only be leaving for a short period of time. Perhaps after many years, I will return to Mount God Bestowment. You have to cultivate diligently. If I see you again in the future and you are too weak, don't tell me that you know me." Wu Kei smiled and shook his head. "Don't worry, young Master Ji. With your words, I will cultivate diligently even if I have to risk my life. I look forward to the day we meet again. When that day comes, I will tell you a secret." "What secret?" Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and looked at him with interest. A playful smile appeared on Wu Kei's face. He pretended to be mysterious. Of course, I cannot tell you now. I will tell you when we meet again. All right. Ji Tianqing smiled helplessly. He nodded and said, let's talk about it in the future then. After he finished speaking, he cupped his hands at the Great Guardian and said, Great Guardian, I'll take my leave now. The Great Guardian nodded and said Ji Tianji to be Tianji. Ji Tianqing stopped and turned around to look at her. He asked calmly, Miss Jiang, what's the matter? Jiang Ningxue looked at him with a complicated look in her eyes. She said with a bitter tone, you're leaving, but you won't even say goodbye to me? Oh. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, Miss Jiang, then I'll take my leave. Jiang Ningxue was a bit embarrassed, but she still summoned her courage and said, wait. Young Master Ji, don't you have anything else to say to me? Ji Tianqing stared at her for a moment before he sternly said, you are a beautiful woman, but you are associated with lowly people. If this goes on for a long time, you will certainly hurt yourself. It will be too late to regret. Jiang Ningxue hurriedly explained, young Master Ji, I know you're still hung up over what happened back then, but I've already made up my mind to never associate with that person again. That's good, Ji Tianqing nodded and said sincerely, you're such a beautiful woman, why do you care about me? If you meet a man you like in the future, just marry him. A bitter smile flashed across Jiang Ningxue's eyes. She murmured in a low voice, if I didn't meet you, it might be possible. But now that I've met you, why would I like another man? Ji Tianqing frowned and said apologetically, I'm sorry, I can't help you with this. Miss Jiang, please use your time to clear your memories. After a long time, when your memories fade away, you'll let it go. My wife is still waiting for me. Goodbye. Then, he turned around and left without looking back. Jiang Ningxue looked at his back sadly. She smiled bitterly and sighed in her heart, once I meet Tianqing, I'll miss him forever. Once I don't meet him, I'll miss him forever. Qin Sangqiong, Song Zhanyu, and Wuk Yin were secretly sizing her up and shaking their heads. Only now did they realize that Jiang Ningxue had already fallen deeply in love with Ji Tianqing. But who could say for sure when it came to love? The Great Guardian did not feel anything. He calmly took out his flying boat. All right, it's time for us to go. Then, he led Song Zhanyu, Jiang Ningxue, and the others into the flying boat and flew up into the sky. After the Great Guardian and the others left, only Ji Tianqing and the 6 people from the Luoshui God Nation were left on the ancient viewing platform. When Ji Tianqing returned to Yunyao had just finished talking with Grandma Long. She smiled and walked up to Ji Tianqing, holding his arm naturally. Then, she walked up to Grandma Long and introduced them. Tianqing, this is Grandma Long, the Great Guardian of the Luoshui God Mountain. Grandma Long, this is Ji. Before Yunyao could finish, Grandma Long interrupted her. She smiled happily and said, there's no need for introductions. I already know that Ji Tianqing is your husband. Grandma Long had a kind look on her face. Her smile was especially happy and gratified. She looked at Ji Tianqing with sparkling eyes as if she had seen a rare treasure. Ji Tianqing cupped his hands and said calmly, Junior Ji Tianqing greets Grandma Long. What do you think? Of course I agree. Grandma Long smiled and nodded. She said confidently, Kid, I'm more than happy that you're willing to come to our Luoshui God Nation. Sigh, I didn't expect such a surprise to come so suddenly. Just now, I was envious of the Great Guardian. I didn't expect the vast God Nation to have such a monstrous genius like you. I didn't expect that in the blink of an eye, you would become the son-in-law of our Luoshui God Nation. This is too surprising. Although I haven't reported this matter to the Divine Lord, I can still make the decision to agree. Tianqing, don't worry, I will take care of you like how I take care of Yunyao in the future. Grandma Long was very emotional. She said so much in one breath, as if she was afraid that Ji Tianqing would go back on his word. Yiqing Luo, Lu Xiaomeng, and the others were dumbfounded as they listened. They looked at Ji Tianqing in disbelief. After a while, when they came back to their senses, they exclaimed in disbelief. Oh my God! Ji Tianqing, you want to join our Luoshui God nation? I can't believe it. You gave up the glory and identity of the number one God's disciple for love? So this is the power of love. I believe in love again. The two young men were still calm. Yi Qingluo and Lu Xiaomeng were extremely emotional. It took them a while to calm down. Grandma Long and Ji Tianqing chatted for a while and then introduced a few God's disciples to him so that they could get to know each other. This is Ji Tianqing, Yun Yao's husband. I don't think I need to introduce him, right? From today onwards, Yun Yao is your big senior sister and Ji Tianqing is your big senior brother. Tianqing, this is Yi Qingluo and this is Lu Xiaomeng, this is Zhou Bin and this is Wen Renyu. Chapter 1687. An ice-blue flying boat sped across the sky towards the east. The airship was 100 feet long and it was very spacious. There was a spacious hall with a dozen rooms and secret rooms. At that moment, Granny Long, Ji Tianqing, Yun Yao, and the rest were gathered in the luxurious hall. The floor of the hall was paved with spiritual jade and the surrounding walls were inlaid with gemstone lamps that shone brightly. Granny Long sat in the main seat while Ji Tianqing, Yun Yao, and Yi Qingluo sat on the left side of the hall. Lu Xiaomeng, Zhou Bin, and Wen Renyu sat on the right side. Ji Tianqing had a preliminary understanding of the few God's disciples through the previous introduction and the short contact they had. Among the 5 God disciples, Yun Yao was the strongest. She had reached the 7th level of the primordial soul realm and was everyone's eldest senior sister. Apart from her, the other 4 God disciples had reached the 6th level of the primordial soul realm. Yi Qingluo, who was ranked 2nd, was tall and wore a green dress. Her face was fair and delicate, and she had a virtuous and elegant temperament. Zhou Bin, who was ranked 3rd, was a tall and elegant young master. He was a man of few words and seemed to be shrewd and insightful. Wen Renyu, who was ranked 4th, wore a white robe. He was thin and handsome. He had a kind face and was more extroverted. However, he had a noble aura that was unique to ancient clans. As for Lu Xiaomeng, who was ranked 5th, she was a petite girl with a cute face. 2 small dimples appeared on her fair cheeks when she smiled. Ji Tianqing did not know much about the group since it was his first time meeting them. He only observed their expressions and actions silently and did not take the initiative to strike up a conversation. At that moment, Granny Long said kindly, "Everyone, you must help each other on Luotian Mountain in the future and improve together under the glory of the Divine Master. Although Ji Tianqing is a new God disciple, you must respect him as your eldest senior brother. You must not secretly exclude or criticize him. You are the God disciple selected from many geniuses. Not only are you the most talented, but you are also the most upright. If anyone dares to disobey my orders, don't blame me for using the law." Granny Long's tone was not harsh, but it had an unquestionable majesty. The God apostles nodded their heads to show that they understood. Lu Xiaomeng, who was the youngest, stuck out her tongue and said, "Granny Long, you worry too much. Senior brother Ji is the number 1 genius of the 3 kingdoms. How would we dare to bully him? Even if we have the guts, we don't have the ability." Wen Renyu nodded and said with a smile, "Junior martial sister Xiao Meng is right. Senior martial brother Ji is a heavenly genius. We don't have the ability to suppress him. Heaven Absolute Divine Nation's Huang Qi was the best example. That Huang Qi is so outstanding, but when he met senior apprentice brother Ji, didn't he still end up dejected and in a sorry state?" Hearing his words, everyone chuckled. Zhou Bin nodded in agreement and said with a solemn expression, "Not only is senior martial brother Ji's strength outstanding, but he is also eldest senior martial sister's husband. Together, they are the role model and leader of all God disciples. Who dares to bully them?" Seeing that no one was against Ji Tianqing, Granny Long was relieved. She nodded with a smile and said, "That's good. I am relieved that all of you can get along well." Then, she looked at Ji Tianqing kindly and asked, "Tianqing, you are new here and you have the reputation of being the number 1 genius of the 3 kingdoms. Everyone is curious about you. Do you have anything you want to say to everyone? Yin Yao and the god apostles turned their heads to look at Ji Tianqing with kind eyes. Ji Tianqing thought for a while and said calmly, "Junior martial brothers and sisters, if you have any problems in the future, you can come to me. If I can help you, I will do my best." These two sentences of his immediately won everyone's favorable impression. Yi Qing Luo, Wen Ren Yu, and the others nodded with a smile and said, "Thank you, Senior Martial Brother Ji. If we have any problems, we will definitely come to you." Lu Xiaoming's big eyes looked around and she suddenly thought of something. She looked at Ji Tianqing with a smile and said jokingly, "Senior Martial Brother Ji, there is no need to wait for the future. I have a question now and I want to ask you." Everyone turned their heads to look at her and teased her with a smile. "Xiaoming is the one with the most ideas. Junior Martial Sister Xiaoming, you are really not polite with Senior Martial Brother Ji." Ji Tianqing nodded at Lu Xiaoming and said, "Junior Martial Sister Xiaoming, ask away." Lu Xiaoming immediately revealed a sly smile, and two small dimples appeared on her pretty face. "Senior Martial Brother Ji, can you tell us what it is like in the ruins of God? Did you find anything in the ruins of God?" Hearing this question, the god apostles looked expectant. Even Granny Long looked at Ji Tianqing and said with a smile, "Xiaoming, you have hit the nail on the head. To be honest, I would like to know too. However, this is related to Tianqing's privacy. If he doesn't want to tell us, don't force him." Ji Tianqing didn't want to tell the truth, but seeing everyone's expectant eyes, he smiled and said, "The ruins of God is actually an alternate dimension and a cemetery. There were countless tombs in the mausoleum, where the gods of various races were buried since ancient times. As for what I found in the ruins of God, it is not worth mentioning. It can't help me increase my strength at all." Hearing this, everyone had a better understanding of the ruins of God. As for what he found, he didn't want to talk about it and the others didn't ask anymore. Next, Lu Xiaoming and Yi Qing Luo asked a few more questions. These questions had nothing to do with martial arts cultivation. They were all gossip about life and relationships. For example, Yi Qing Luo asked Ji Tianqing how he met Yun Yao and how he captured Yun Yao's heart. Lu Xiaoming's questions were even more tricky. She asked if Ji Tianqing was afraid of his wife. Would he want a son or a daughter in the future? These quirky questions amused everyone to the point of snickering endlessly, and the atmosphere became extremely lively and cheerful. Yun Yao didn't feel embarrassed or angry. She just looked at Ji Tianqing quietly and waited for his answer. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing used his outstanding wisdom and reaction to deal with these questions. Everyone chatted in the hall for half a day and closed the distance between them. It was late at night that everyone returned to their rooms to rest. Ji Tianqing followed Yun Yao back to her room. The two hugged each other intimately for a while before they began to talk about business. Only now did Ji Tianqing tell Yun Yao about his experience and knowledge in the ruins of God with a serious expression. In the cemetery of the gods, there are hundreds of tombs lined up from the foot of the mountain to the peak. I found the tomb of the white dragon god and saved a wisp of his remnant soul. Unfortunately, I didn't find Kenshin's tomb. Old man of the ruins of God said that Kenshin didn't really die. However, I saw the tomb of the Jade Light God King on the mountain peak. Chapter 1688. After listening to Ji Tianqing's story, Yun Yao was rather shocked. She pondered for a moment before saying, 1,000 years ago, Kenshin and Divine Lord White Dragon perished one after another. Divine Lord White Dragon's tomb is in the ruins of gods, but Kenshin's tomb isn't there. If things are as Old Man Godly Ruins said, the ruins of gods are the greatest secret in the world. As long as a god of this world perishes, a tomb will appear in the ruins of gods. This means that Kenshin didn't really perish. Perhaps he will be like other gods, leaving behind a wisp of his remnant soul. He will awaken and be reborn, or reincarnated. At this point, Yun Yao stared at Ji Tianqing and said in a serious tone, "Tianqing, have you ever thought that you are actually?" Ji Tianqing nodded and revealed a playful smile. "I've actually suspected this question a long time ago, but unfortunately, I've never been able to verify it. In the past year or so, memories of Kenshin would often appear in the depths of my soul. I believe this is not a coincidence. There must be a reason. Yunyao nodded slightly and comforted him. Don't worry. The truth will surface sooner or later. Perhaps when you are strong enough, you will be able to solve the mystery. Ji Tianqing acknowledged and stopped discussing the topic. I saw Divine Monarch Naker Light's tomb at the peak of the Cemetery of the Gods. I tried to communicate with the tomb, and after a long time, I sensed that there was a divine power aura hidden in the tomb. Unfortunately, before I could figure out what the divine power was, I expended too much energy and fainted. When I woke up, the one-day deadline was up. Old Man Godly Ruin sent me out of the ruins of gods. Sigh. What a pity. If I could obtain that divine power aura, it would definitely be of great benefit to you. Yunyao held his hands and said calmly, you have already done your best. Don't blame yourself or feel regret. Old Man Godly Ruins also said that everything depends on fate. Perhaps it's because your opportunity hasn't arrived yet, that's why you can't obtain that ball of divine power. However, if there's a chance in the future, I'll definitely enter the ruins of gods personally to take a look at God King Nakrolite's tomb. Ji Tianqing smiled. Now that you are the reincarnation of the Nakrolite goddess, if you can reach her tomb, you'll definitely be able to obtain that ball of divine power. Yes. Yunyao nodded slightly and said calmly, we can't rush this matter. I've only just awakened some memories of Goddess Yaoguang, and my strength is increasing rapidly. In a few more years, when I become stronger and awaken more memories, I might have more confidence in going to the ruins of God. Let's not talk about this for now. Let me tell you about the Luo River God Nation. Ji Tianqing nodded. All right. Yunyao calmly explained, the Luo Shui Divine Kingdom is located to the east of Shenwu Continent, and the easternmost part of the continent is the Endless Sky Sea. It was said that on the other side of the Heavenly Sea was another continent. However, the Heavenly Sea was sealed by a deity, so it could not be crossed. The Luo Shui Divine Kingdom's national strength is comparable to the Boundless Divine Kingdom, and it might even be slightly stronger. There are a total of 7 empires, and each empire has billions of cultivators and commoners. It has been peaceful for thousands of years. In the middle of the 7 empires, there is a sacred land of martial arts known as Luo Shui Mountain. This is a training ground established by the Luo Shui Divine Lord. Currently, there are only 10 God disciples left on Luo Shui Mountain. Including you, there are 11 of them. Granny Long is highly regarded by the Luo Shui Divine Lord, and she leads Luo Shui Mountain. She also has 3 protectors and 7 divine envoys under her. Ji Tianqing listened quietly and quickly understood the situation at Luo Shui Mountain. From his point of view, Luo Shui Mountain's situation was very similar to God Sealing Mountains, and the relationships between the people were much simpler. This was beneficial for the God disciples to focus on their cultivation without having to waste time and effort to scheme against each other. An hour later, Yunyao finished explaining the situation at Luo Shui Mountain in detail. The two chatted about other things, and Yunyao asked Ji Tianqing about his experiences and encounters over the past year. Ji Tianqing talked about the situation in Tianxian continent, as well as the destruction of the fiend race and the escape of the fiend emperor. Naturally, he mentioned the ghost race in Dark North Mountain, the 36 demon monarchs, the blood god, and so on. After a night, Ji Tianqing told Yunyao about his experiences over the past year in detail. Only then did Yunyao know how much pain and danger he had experienced, and how much pressure he had endured. This also made her cherish the present reunion even more. For the next 20 days, the flying ship sped through the sky. They passed through more than half of the Heaven Extinction Divine Nation, crossing hundreds of millions of miles of territory. During this period, Ji Tianqing and the other gods' disciples were meditating and cultivating in their own rooms. 25 days later, the flying ship finally returned to Luo Shui Mountain. At this time, Ji Tianqing had already refined the azure with divine power given to him by Old Man Godly Ruins after more than 20 days of cultivation. His body and essence soul had reached their peak state. His strength had also more than doubled, reaching the peak of the 8th level Essence Soul Realm. Early in the morning, the sun had just risen. The ice blue flying ship came to the peak of a 10,000-meter tall mountain and stopped. Granny Long transmitted her voice to the 6 god disciples. "Everyone, we have returned to Luoshui Mountain." When everyone heard her voice, they ended their cultivation and rushed to the spacious hall to gather. When Granny Long saw that everyone had arrived, she cast a spell and put away the ice blue flying ship. Swoosh! With a flash of light, the flying ship disappeared. Everyone's figures appeared in the sky, standing directly above the 10,000-meter tall mountain. They saw that the sky above their heads was a clear blue, without any impurities. The sky around them was filled with white clouds and mist that flowed slowly like a stream. Below their feet was a 10,000-meter tall, ice-blue mountain. Even though the mountain was shrouded in clouds and the appearance of the mountain could not be seen clearly, it still exuded a sacred and majestic aura. The peak of the mountain was a flat land with a radius of 50 miles. On this flat land, there were more than 30 magnificent, simple, and elegant palaces, as well as more than a dozen residences. The extremely dense spiritual chi of heaven and earth formed 5-colored auspicious clouds that covered the palaces. Squads of guards in ice-blue armor were patrolling the palaces and mansions. This was the martial arts sacred ground of the Luoshui divine nation, Luoshui Mountain. Ji Tianqing looked down at Luoshui Mountain and felt that it was filled with a peaceful and warm aura. He believed that the atmosphere here was better than Mount God and was more suitable for cultivation. "Let's go." Granny Long called out and led everyone through the defensive array and landed on Luoshui Mountain. Yi Qing Luo, Lu Xiaoming, Zhou Bin, and the others said goodbye to everyone and returned to their own residences. In the end, only Granny Long, Ji Tianqing, and Yunyao were left. Granny Long looked at Yunyao and said with a smile, "Yunyao, Ji Tianqing has come to Luoshui Mountain. With his status and talent, I should arrange a palace for him. However, he is your husband and I would like to hear your opinion about his residence." Yunyao did not hesitate or feel embarrassed. She said naturally, "Tianqing is my husband. How can I let him live elsewhere? It is not good for others to serve him." Chapter 1689. As for Ji Tianqing's residence, it was decided just like that. After Granny Long bade farewell, she rushed back to her residence to report to God Lord Luoshui about Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao passed through several wide paths and walked towards the Cloud Water Palace in the depths of the palace complex. The two strolled leisurely, admiring the scenery of Luoshan Mountain as they walked. Yunyao introduced the various palaces to Ji Tianqing, helping him familiarize himself with the situation of Luoshan Mountain. After all, he was going to stay here for a long time, so he had to familiarize himself with the environment. An hour later, the two returned to Cloud Water Palace. This palace was located deep in the mountain peak, and there were many palaces and courtyards around it. Cloud Water Palace was 1,000 feet wide, with 3 floors and dozens of rooms. There were also 2 gardens, one at the front and one at the back. The resplendent palace was filled with golden beams and painted rafters. It was very luxurious and dignified. Ji Tianqing asked Yunyao and learned that Luoshan Mountain had arranged dozens of guards and maids for Cloud Water Palace. Those guards were all elite soldiers, and the maids were all young and smart, obedient and sensible people. Fortunately, Yunyao did her best to stop Granny Long, leaving only the maids and guards. Otherwise, Granny Long would have arranged more than 100 guards and maids for her. In addition, Ji Tianqing discovered that Cloud Water Palace was protected by powerful divine arrays. There were also 4 sage-level arrays used to absorb heaven and earth spirit chi to aid cultivation. The heaven and earth spirit chi in Cloud Water Palace was 8 times denser than in other palaces. It was very beneficial to martial artists' cultivation. Ji Tianqing asked Yunyao and learned that Cloud Water Palace used to be martial god Luoshui's residence. However, martial god Luoshui resided in Outer Heaven Divine Palace and would not come to Luoshan Mountain. Martial god Luoshui was not married, and she did not have a divine son or divine daughter. Usually, she would send a message to Granny Long or send a divine official if there were any decrees or matters. Only when a divine official came to Luotian Mountain would she temporarily stay in Cloud Water Palace. All the signs indicated that Yunyao enjoyed the best treatment and the best cultivation resources in the Luotian Mountain. Ji Tianqing was not surprised at all, and he understood the real reason. After all, Yao Yao has inherited goddess Yao Guang's legacy and is the person the Luo Shui martial god values the most. No matter how generous Yao Yao's treatment is, it's not excessive. Yin Yao led Ji Tianqing around the Cloud Water Palace before returning to their residence on the second floor. The two of them had just reached the entrance of the living room when they saw a draconian man in golden armor. This person was tall and mighty. Moreover, we should have consummated our marriage 2 years ago when we got married. It's just that there were so many twists and turns that we delayed it until now. Hubby, it's been hard on you. Hearing her shy and timid words, Ji Tianqing's heart was tickled. He revealed a mischievous smile and said, I've been on the road for more than 20 days. I'm physically and mentally exhausted now. Yao Yao, I'm a little tired. Why don't we go to bed and rest now? Yin Yao's pretty face turned even redder. Her cheeks burned, and her clear eyes were so gentle that they almost dripped with water. She leaned on Ji Tianqing's shoulder and asked in a weak voice, Tianqing, it's still daytime. We just came back. Wouldn't it be inappropriate to do it now? Ji Tianqing immediately smiled mischievously and said, Ahem. Hubby, I'm just saying. Consummating our marriage is such an important and sacred thing. Of course, we have to wait until night to avoid being disturbed. I still have some things to deal with, so I'll go out first. Yin Yao finally understood that he was deliberately teasing her. She couldn't help but glare at him reproachfully. You go ahead. I just came back. I also have some things to deal with. Then, the two of them left the room one after the other. Yin Yao took Black Shadow and left the Cloud Water Palace to deal with some private matters. Ji Tianqing entered the secret room, opened the Sword World, and summoned Ji Bai and Shohei. Before this, Ji Bai and Shohei had been healing and cultivating in the Sword World. After such a long time of recuperation, Ji Bai's injuries had long since healed, and his essence, energy, and spirit had recovered to their peak. The two of them appeared in the dark secret room and cupped their hands to Ji Tianqing. Master, why did you summon us? Chapter 1690. Ji Bai and Shohei clearly did not understand the situation. Ji Tianqing had no choice but to briefly explain what had happened before. After the two of them heard this, they were stunned. Master, you actually gave up on the vast divine nation and joined the Luo Shui divine nation? Master, you actually have a wife? Your wife is the #1 god disciple of the Luo Shui divine nation. Ji Bai's reaction could still be considered calm. He was originally rather cold. Shohei became even more excited. He looked at Ji Tianqing in disbelief and exclaimed with a complicated tone, I really can't believe that you and Madam are both peerless geniuses. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and explained, when I joined Mount God Bestowment, it was not to become a god's disciple, but to find the whereabouts of my wife. Now that I've reunited with her, of course I'll stay by her side and never leave her. Moreover, the Luo Shui martial god had a close relationship with the Kenshin and had even received favors from the Kenshin. If the Luo Shui martial god knows that I'm here, he'll definitely take care of me. Ji Bai calmly nodded his head and said, that's right. Furthermore, the Luo Shui divine country is closer to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. For us, it's more convenient. When Ji Bai mentioned the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, Ji Tianqing recalled the map of the Shenwu continent. The 3 divine kingdoms were located in the west, center, and east of the continent. The northernmost part of the Heaven End God nation was the North Underworld mountain where the ghost race was entrenched. It was extremely dangerous. In the north of the Luo Shui God nation, there was an unclaimed region of 1 billion miles, and it was ruled by the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. That's right, Ji Bai, Shohei, since you followed me to the Luo River God nation, you should report back to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. For the next period of time, I might stay in the Luotian mountain and be safe. If you have something to do and need to leave, just do it. You don't have to protect me anymore. Ji Bai and Shohei looked at each other, then cupped their hands and bowed to Ji Tianqing. Thank you, Master, for your help. We do have something to do and need to return to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, It's fine. Go ahead. Shohei added and explained, Master, don't worry. We will deal with the matter as soon as possible and rush back to protect you. According to my estimation, he will be back in 3 months at most. Yes, no problem. Ji Tianqing nodded his head again as he warned, There's no time to lose. I'll send you all out of the Luotian mountain now. It's a long journey back to Tianzhu mountain from here, so you have to pay attention to your safety. After that, Ji Tianqing personally sent Ji Bai and Shohei off. After the two of them left Luotian mountain, Ji Tianqing returned to Cloudwater Palace. He had nothing to do, so he meditated in his bedroom and waited for Yunya to come back. Soon, half a day had passed. By the time Yunya finished her work and returned to her room, it was already night time. Husband, sorry to keep you waiting. Yunya looked at Ji Tianqing with an apologetic expression. Ji Tianqing sat on the spacious spiritual jade bed and looked at her with a smile. He patted the quilt next to him and said, Yao Yao, you must be tired after a busy day, right? Come and rest. Yunya revealed a shy expression. She lowered her head and said in a low voice, Husband, don't be impatient. I'll go to the hot spring to bathe and clean my body first, then I'll come and serve you. Ji Tianqing had long known that she had the habit of soaking in hot springs, so he said with a mischievous smile, Oh? Yao Yao, is there a hot spring in your bedroom too? Why don't I accompany you and wash your body and mind before resting? It'll be more solemn and holy. As he spoke, he got up and got out of bed without waiting for Yunyao's reply. He walked in front of Yunyao, stretched out his arms, and carried Yunyao in his arms. He then walked towards the back of the bedroom. Yunyao struggled a few times, but she couldn't break free from his embrace, so she could only let him hold her. There was a secret door at the back of the bedroom. After it was opened, it was connected to a secret room with a radius of 5 feet. This secret room was the hot spring, and the surrounding walls were embedded with moonstones. There were many rare gems scattered in the hot spring pool. The warm water in the pool was emitting steam in spirals, and the hundreds of gems at the bottom of the pool were emitting colorful brilliance, releasing invisible spiritual energy and power. Ji Tianqing carried Yunya to the side of the pool and gently helped her take off her white dress bit by bit. Yunyao lowered her head in embarrassment. Her cheeks were flushed, and her pair of sparkling earlobes had also turned pink. After a while, the two of them took off their clothes and stepped into the hot spring together. Ji Tianqing didn't tease Yunyao anymore. He sat side by side with her in the pool, silently thinking about something. A few years ago, when the two of them were still in the Sky Pillar sect, they had also soaked in the hot spring together. However, at that time, the two of them hadn't confirmed their relationship, nor were they married. What happened that night was also a beautiful misunderstanding. Now, the two of them were in the same hot spring, and their identities were different. The two of them were officially husband and wife. There was no need to hide anymore, let alone hide. Ji Tianqing looked at Yunyao gently, enjoying the perfect and graceful scenery. This was the first time the two of them were naked to each other. Ji Tianqing feasted his eyes, and he was quite amazed in his heart. Yunyao's beauty was truly the product of the heavens and earth. She was as beautiful as the sun and moon. From head to toe, every part of her body was perfect. She was so beautiful that it shook one's soul, causing one to be captivated by it. She was simply a masterpiece of the Creator. 15 minutes later, the two of them had washed their bodies and minds, and their emotions were soothed and calmed down. Previously, Yunyao had been lowering her head and hugging her arms, blocking the most impressive scenery. Now that her emotions had calmed down, she no longer hid anything from Ji Tianqing. She allowed him to pull her into his arms and snuggle up to him intimately. Ji Tianqing's eyes became more and more passionate, and his body temperature kept rising. Yun Yao's cheeks were already red, and her eyes were a little misty. Thus, Ji Tianqing carried her out of the hot spring. After circulating his energy to evaporate the water droplets all over their bodies, the two of them lay on the warm and pleasant jade bed. Ji Tianqing carried Yun Yao with one hand and pulled up the quilt with the other. Then, he began a wonderful exploration under the quilt. Yun Yao couldn't restrain her shyness, so she waved her hand and sent out a spiritual light to extinguish all the gemstone lights in the room. When the room fell into darkness and silence, she began to respond to Ji Tianqing's exploration. Not long after, Yun Yao let out a slightly painful groan, and the two of them no longer had any gap between them, and they entered a wonderful and tender land together. The dimly lit room was filled with a warm and romantic atmosphere. Good times were always short. Ji Tianqing had been tormenting her for the whole night, but he was still a little unsatisfied. He had played with every beautiful scenery to his heart's content. It wasn't until dawn, when Yun Yao was a little tired, that he stopped his invasion and fell asleep quietly with her in his arms. Yun Yao nestled in his arms meekly and stared at him quietly. She felt his breathing and aura, and her emotions were complicated. Tianqing, from today onwards, we really belong to each other. You and I are a real husband and wife. We breathe together, share a destiny, and there is no barrier between us. In this life, no one and nothing can separate us. Chapter 1691. For the next few days, the Luotian mountain was very peaceful. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao stayed in the Cloud Water Palace, and no one came to disturb them. Every day during the day, the two of them would look at the scenery on the Luotian mountain, watch the sunrise and sunset, and talk about the past. At night, the two of them would sleep in the same room and immerse themselves in infinite tenderness and love, enjoying the wonderful moment. This kind of peaceful life was what Ji Tianqing yearned for the most. Most importantly, he could accompany Yun Yao day and night, and it was very happy and sweet. It was no exaggeration to say that in his short 20-odd years of life, these few days were the happiest days for him. On the morning of the 5th day, in the Cloud Dragon Palace deep in the Luotian mountain, in an exquisite and elegant secret room, Grandma Long was standing respectfully and staring at a diamond-shaped gem on the stone table in front of her. The gem lit up with white light and condensed into a light screen the size of a table. A graceful blue figure appeared in the silver-white light screen. It was a young woman in an ice-blue dress, and she had a noble, elegant, and holy temperament. From her face, she seemed to be in her 20s. But on her peerlessly beautiful face was a pair of clear and deep eyes that were like a sea of stars, and they contained wisdom and experience that could see through everything. Her temperament was cold and holy, and she was as graceful as a swimming dragon. She was like a cloud that covered the moon, and she was like snow that drifted in the wind. She frowned and looked at Grandma Long with sparkling eyes. She asked gently, "The number one God's disciple of the vast divine nation is Yun Yao's husband? In order to be with Yun Yao, he is willing to join the Luotian mountain?" Granny Long nodded with a smile and said respectfully, reporting to the Divine Lord, "That is indeed the case. I have interacted with Ji Tianqing a few times, and I can be sure that this is not a conspiracy." Ji Tianqing said that he joined the God-sealing mountain to find his wife, Yun Yao. The blue-robed woman listened to her explanation, and her brows slowly relaxed. Then, she said with a gratified look on her face, "That's good. This is an unexpected surprise and harvest." That guy named Ji Tianqing was the number one disciple of God in the Three Kingdoms. He was indeed a rare genius to be able to shine in the conference. Since he is willing to join the Luotian mountain, we will naturally not reject him. Granny Long, you have to make proper arrangements for him. Let him cultivate in peace on the Luotian mountain and provide him with as many cultivation resources as possible. If he and Yun Yao can grow up quickly, they will definitely be of great help to me in the future. Maybe they can help me solve that crisis. Granny Long cupped her hands again and reported with a smile, "Don't worry, Divine Lord. This old one has made the necessary arrangements. Ji Tianqing is currently living with Yun Yao in Cloud Water Palace, enjoying the best cultivation environment and treatment. Before she could finish speaking, the woman in the blue dress was startled. Her expression abruptly changed, and her pair of embroidered eyebrows furrowed together. What? Granny Long, you actually let them live together? Granny Long was also startled. Then, she explained with a face full of doubts, Divine Lord, I didn't take the initiative to arrange this. Yin Yao requested this from me. However, they are husband and wife. Their love is stronger than gold. There is nothing wrong with them living together, right? The woman in the blue dress expression became even worse. She said with a worried look, if that's the case, aren't they already in the same room? Granny Long suddenly felt a little embarrassed. She smiled bitterly and said, Divine Lord, how can I ask about such a private matter? Moreover, they are husband and wife. It is natural for them to sleep together. Silly. The woman in the blue dress was a little angry. She said with a worried look, Granny Long, there is something that I didn't tell you. I didn't expect you to make such a big mistake. Yin Yao is different from other disciples of God. She was born extraordinary. In the future, she swore to become a divine spirit that is on par with me. No, she is even stronger than me. It is because of this that I treated her as my own daughter. I gave her the title of the first disciple of God and gave her the title of goddess. However, she is still in the process of awakening and budding. Her 7 souls are not complete yet. Her lifespan is also very short. She must maintain a pure and flawless body to stabilize her life and divine soul. Before her 7 souls are gathered, she must not sleep with a man. Otherwise, there will be a big problem. Granny Long was dumbfounded when she heard this series of secrets. She was stunned and stood there with her mouth open. After a long time, she came back to her senses. She quickly bowed and apologized to the woman in the blue dress. Divine Lord, I was foolish to make such a big mistake and hurt Yin Yao. Please punish me, Divine Lord. Granny Long was really panicking. Her expression and eyes were full of worry and regret. She knew how important Yin Yao was to the Divine Lord. She also knew how angry and worried the Divine Lord was at this moment. The woman in the blue dress took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in her heart. She waved her hand and said, those who don't know are not guilty. It is I who concealed this information. I don't blame you. According to Yin Yao, she and Ji Tianqing got married 2 years ago. However, before that, she had always been a pure virgin. She did not consummate her marriage with Ji Tianqing. Therefore, the situation may not be as bad as we think. Maybe they were busy cultivating and did not consummate their marriage. After all, martial artists who have reached this level of strength don't have much interest in matters of love. Granny Long was relieved. She nodded and said, I hope so. However, just in case, I still have to separate them. Don't worry, Divine Lord. I will go and find Ji Tianqing now and arrange a place for him alone. The woman in the blue dress shook her head and said seriously, this is not appropriate. They are a legitimate couple. What reason do you have to separate them? You can only use Yin Yao as an excuse to take her away temporarily and separate her from Ji Tianqing for half a month with the excuse of imparting a secret technique to her. In addition, I will send a heavenly official to the Luotian mountain to accompany Yin Yao and check on Yin Yao's condition. Heavenly official Luo Li has a good relationship with Yin Yao. They are like sisters. It is more suitable for her to handle this matter than you. Granny Long nodded and bowed respectfully. I understand. Don't worry, Divine Lord. The woman in the blue dress nodded and sighed worriedly. Yin Yao, oh Yin Yao. I have spent decades of effort to get you to where you are today. Don't lose the big picture because of a small matter and ruin my final plan. Granny Long looked at the screen quietly. She frowned and thought about the Divine Lord's words. However, she was confused. She did not know what kind of shocking plan the Divine Lord had. She only knew that Yin Yao was extremely important to the Divine Lord. She could not lose her. After a while, the woman in the blue dress turned and left, disappearing from the screen. The white screen dissipated and the gem returned to normal. Chapter 1692. The sun was only high in the sky, and the sun was shining brightly. The entire peak of Luotian Mountain was immersed in peace and harmony. In Yun Yao's room in the Cloud Water Palace, Ji Tianqing was still hugging Yun Yao as he rested on the bed and chatted with her with his eyes closed. Yun Yao's long hair was messily draped over her shoulders, and a hint of tiredness appeared on her beautiful face. Seeing Ji Tianqing enjoying himself, she asked, "Husband, it's already high in the sky. Aren't we going to get up? If we continue to laze around in bed, Black Eagle and those maids will laugh behind our backs again. You've been indulging in pleasure for the past few days. I'm afraid your body won't be able to take it." Ji Tianqing looked at her with a smile and reached out to caress her cheek. He teased, "We've been through so many hardships, and we've almost lost our lives countless times. It wasn't easy to get today's peace and happiness. How can I not cherish it? Who asked my wife to be so perfect and as beautiful as a fairy? Not to mention 5 days, even 500 days won't be enough for me. As for my husband's body, it will never get tired. If it weren't for the fact that you're getting more and more tired these past few days, your husband would just want to stay in bed with you for half a month." Yun Yao's cheeks turned red from his indecent words, and her eyes were covered with a thick layer of shyness. "Humph, don't talk nonsense again." Shameless, as she spoke, she turned her back to Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing was about to coax her when Black Eagle's voice came from outside the room. "Master, Granny Long has something to discuss with you. She's waiting for you in the study." Suddenly hearing this news, Yun Yao hurriedly picked up the bellyband and dress at the bedside and began to put on her clothes. "Tianqing, we should get up. Granny Long came to see me. We can't let her wait too long. Otherwise, it'll be so embarrassing." Ji Tianqing stopped teasing her and began to get up and put on his clothes. After a while, Yun Yao got dressed and went to wash up. When she was done, she left the bedroom and went to the study to see Granny Long. Ji Tianqing got up slowly and washed up. After he was done, he made a cup of spirit tea and sat in the living room waiting for Yun Yao to come back. About a quarter of an hour later, he finished a cup of tea and Yun Yao returned to the living room. "Tianqing, I have something to tell you." Yun Yao walked up to Ji Tianqing and said. Ji Tianqing looked at her hesitant expression and raised his eyebrows. "Yao Yao, what's the matter?" Yun Yao hesitated for a moment before explaining. "Grandma Long came to find me because she wanted to teach me a secret technique. If I want to master this secret technique, I have to go to the ice spirit cave in the back mountain with her and cultivate in seclusion for at least half a month." Ji Tianqing nodded his head without hesitation. "Yao Yao, if you want to learn that secret technique, you can go with Grandma Long, but if I leave, no one will be with you." Yun Yao looked at him apologetically. Ji Tianqing immediately waved his hand with a smile. "Don't worry about me. We've been apart for a year and I've already persevered. Why would I care about half a month? After you go into seclusion, I'll also go into seclusion for half a month. Isn't that enough?" Only then did Yun Yao reveal a faint smile. She nodded and said, "Thank you, husband. I'll go now." "Go ahead." Ji Tianqing nodded with a smile and personally escorted her out of the Cloud Water Palace. After Yun Yao left, he also entered the secret chamber and began to busy himself. The heaven and earth spirit qi was extremely dense in the secret chamber. In the corner of the secret chamber, there was a large cloud of 5-colored spirit qi floating in the air. 5-colored spirit qi constantly dripped down, forming a pool of spirit qi in the corner. There were countless secret compartments on the surrounding walls that stored vast amounts of spirit qi, and other resources. In the middle of the secret chamber, there was a spirit jade throne with a 7-leaf white lotus that could assist in cultivation. Ji Tianqing sat cross-legged on the throne, holding a spirit jade glaze bottle with both hands. He was absorbed in it. Inside the spirit jade glaze bottle, there was a weak divine soul floating quietly. Ji Tianqing stared at the divine soul for a long time, but he didn't find any signs of the divine soul growing or awakening. Sigh. It seems that the divine soul left by the white dragon god is too weak. It can't recover on its own. I can only find a way to help it recover its strength and awaken it as soon as possible. After muttering a few words, he used his spiritual perception to ask, Burial of Heaven, is there any way to help the white dragon god's divine soul recover as soon as possible? Burial of Heaven had already been awakened by him. It said in a low voice, there is a way. Just like what I did back then, I have to constantly absorb heaven and earth spirit chi or dermic powers to slowly recover. Especially some rare treasures, spirit herbs, and so on, the effects are more obvious. Upon hearing its words, Ji Tianqing had an idea. He hurriedly rummaged through his interspatial ring. Moments later, he took out a spirit fruit that was as red as fire from his interspatial ring. He held it in his palm and examined it. This spirit fruit was only the size of a thumb. It was glowing with a red light and contained an astonishing amount of spirit chi and power. Ji Tianqing smiled and said, previously in the ruins of God, Old Man of God gave me this vermilion fruit, but I didn't have the time to refine it. If I can refine this vermilion fruit, I can immediately break through to the 9th level of the essence soul realm and even reach the half-step tribulation transcendence realm. However, with my own cultivation, I can also break through very quickly. This vermilion fruit is too convenient for White Dragon. Before he could finish speaking, Burial of Heaven's voice sounded in his mind. Are you sure you want to use this vermilion fruit to help Little White recover her spirit power? Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment before he asked, why not? This vermilion fruit is a top spirit treasure. Even martial sages would fight for it. Wouldn't its effects be even more powerful? Silly. Burial of Heaven said unhappily, if you use this vermilion fruit, you can indeed help Little White recover some of her spirit power. However, this is too extravagant and wasteful. The greatest effect of the vermilion fruit is to increase one's cultivation, stabilize one's soul, and raise one's spirit aptitude. Isn't your wife's soul missing? You can make the best use of this vermilion fruit if you let her consume it. Ji Tianqing finally understood the reason and hurriedly kept the vermilion fruit. In that case, I'll definitely leave it for Yao Yao. With that said, he looked at the glass bottle in his hand and smiled apologetically. White Dragon, it's not that I can't bear to part with it, but the vermilion fruit is really not suitable for you. However, don't worry, I'll do my best to help you recover your spirit power. With that said, he took out a huge amount of spirit stones, gems, elixir materials, and so on and stuffed them all into the glass bottle. He cast a spell to activate the array formation in the glass bottle and gradually refined the spirit stones, elixirs, and materials, transforming them into pure spirit chi of heaven and earth to nourish White Dragon's remnant soul. After doing all this, he put away the glass bottle and began to cultivate in peace. The azure wood divine power that Old Man of God had given him was still hidden in his body and had not been completely refined. Chapter 1693. For half a month, Ji Tianqing cultivated in seclusion in a secret chamber. Yunyao followed Granny Long to cultivate her secret techniques in the ice spirit cave behind the mountain. During this period, Yiqing Luo, Lu Xiaomeng, and Zobin visited Cloudwater Palace. They either sought out Yunyao or sought out Ji Tianqing to resolve their doubts. Unfortunately, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao were cultivating in seclusion. The trio could only return empty-handed. On the morning of the 16th day, Ji Tianqing ended his seclusion and left the secret chamber. Last night, he had completely refined the azure with divine power and naturally broke through the bottleneck to reach the 9th level of the essence soul realm. Now that he was out of seclusion, his essence, chi, and spirit were at their peak. His strength was more than twice as strong as before. After leaving the secret chamber, he went to the living room. When he saw Black Eagle standing guard in the living room, he asked, Black Eagle, has Yao Yao returned? Black Eagle bowed to him and answered truthfully, Young Master Ji, Master went to the ice spirit cave with Granny Long and has yet to return. If Master wants to cultivate the secret technique, I'm afraid it'll take some time. Please wait patiently. Okay. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said calmly, I'm not in a hurry. She will naturally return after she finishes her cultivation. By the way, has anyone come to look for Yun Yao and me in the past half a month? Black Eagle cupped his hands and reported, Young Master Ji, Yi Qing Luo, Lu Xiaomeng, and Zhou Bin have all come. Yi Qing Luo came to look for Master. Lu Xiaomeng and Zhou Bin wanted to seek your guidance on some cultivation problems. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, Okay, got it. The next time they come to look for me, please inform me. With that said, he left the living room and returned to his bedroom to meditate. Having just broken through to the 9th level of the Essence Soul realm, he still needed to cultivate for a few days to stabilize his realm and solidify his martial foundation. Soon, a day passed. The next morning, Ji Tianqing was still meditating when he was awakened by the sound of footsteps outside his room. As soon as he got up and walked out of the bedroom, he saw Heiying supporting Yun Yao and walking quickly towards the door. Yun Yao's face was a little pale. She frowned in pain and staggered a little. She seemed to be suffering and tormenting. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing's expression suddenly changed. He hurriedly went up and asked with concern, Yao Yao, what's wrong? What happened? Tianqing. Yun Yao looked up at him and comforted him in a weak voice, Don't worry, I'm fine. Quickly enter the room to rest. Ji Tianqing hurriedly supported her and brought her into the room, allowing her to lie on the jade bed. After Yun Yao lay down, he looked at Heiying and asked with a frown, Heiying, what's going on? Heiying did not dare to hide anything and hurriedly answered, reporting to young Master Ji, Granny Long just sent Master back. Master just returned to the palace and became like this. This subordinate also does not know what exactly is going on. Ji Tianqing frowned and looked at Yun Yao with concern. Yao Yao, didn't Granny Long bring you to the Ice Spirit Cave to teach you? Did you get injured while practicing martial arts? Or did Granny Long do something to you? Yun Yao shook her head gently. Her lips were pale and bloodless. She said in a weak voice, Tianqing, it's not Granny Long's fault. It's my body that's in trouble. Let me see where you're injured. Ji Tianqing reached out and held her wrist. He sent a strand of his divine sense into her body to check on her condition. Soon, his divine sense wandered around Yun Yao's body and carefully checked it. To his surprise, Yun Yao's body did not have any abnormalities. It was very normal. How could this be? Ji Tianqing frowned in confusion. He was unwilling to give up and checked again. Yun Yao saw that he was worried and anxious. She comforted him gently, Tianqing, don't worry too much. I'm really fine. For the past half a month, I've been in seclusion with Granny Long in the Ice Spirit Cave. Every 2 or 3 days, my condition would act up. I just need to rest for half a day and I'll be able to recover on my own. Ji Tianqing looked at her with concern and asked, Yao Yao, where are you feeling unwell? I just checked on you. There's nothing wrong with your body. Could it be that there's something wrong with your primordial spirit? Yin Yao pursed her lips. She neither nodded nor denied it. Ji Tianqing immediately guessed that there was something wrong with her soul. After all, her soul was incomplete. She was different from ordinary martial artists. She only had a few years left to live. He was about to cast a spell to check on Yin Yao's primordial spirit. At this moment, a series of footsteps came from outside the door. It was followed by the Golden Dragon's voice. Master, young Master Ji, Granny Long and Lord Heavenly Official have come to visit. Suddenly hearing this news, Ji Tianqing turned his head to look outside the door and frowned in confusion. Lord Heavenly Official? Is she from the Kingdom of Gods? The female official by the Divine Master's side? Yin Yao revealed a faint smile and nodded, yes, Lord Heavenly Official's name is Luo Li. She's a very good friend of mine. We're like sisters. Tianqing, I can't get up to greet them. Please greet them for me. When she finished speaking, Granny Long and Lord Heavenly Official Luo Li had already crossed the door and entered the room. Lord Heavenly Official Luo Li walked in front. She was a young woman wearing an icicle dress and a blue crystal crown on her head. She was tall and slender, with a gentle and beautiful face. She had a fair oval face, and a pair of bright eyes like autumn water. Her temperament was elegant and refined. Her whole body was filled with a noble, elegant, and gentle aura. Granny Long followed behind her. Her wrinkled face was filled with worry and anxiety. When Luo Li entered the room, she stared at Yun Yao, who was lying on the bed. She said with concern, "Yao Yao, you're not feeling well. Lie down and rest." Yun Yao turned to look at her. She supported her body with her hands and tried to sit up. Luo Li hurriedly walked over and pressed down on her shoulders, making her lie down again. Ji Tianqing cupped his hands towards Luo Li and Granny Long. He said, "Greetings, Lord Heavenly Official." "Greetings, Granny Long." Granny Long nodded slightly in greeting, while Luo Li stared at him with a complicated look in her eyes. Ji Tianqing could vaguely feel that Luo Li's impression of him was a little subtle. She seemed to hate and blame him. However, because Yun Yao was present, she didn't show it. Luo Li was silent for a moment. She then nodded and said, "You're Yao Yao's husband, young Master Ji Tianqing?" "That's right," Ji Tianqing replied. He then asked in a low voice, "May I know why Lord Heavenly Official Luo is looking for Yao Yao?" Luo Li looked at Yun Yao and said in a serious tone, "I'm here to see Yao Yao on the orders of the Lord Heavenly Official." The Lord Heavenly Official had already expected that Yao Yao would have a problem. "I didn't expect that I would still be a step too late." Chapter 1694. Ji Tianqing was worried about Yun Yao's health, so he didn't want to leave. However, he guessed that Luo Li might have something to say to Yun Yao alone. Therefore, he nodded and left the room. After he left, only Yun Yao, Luo Li, and Grandma Long were left in the room. Yun Yao looked at Luo Li with a complicated expression and asked, "Luo Li, how did the Divine Master know that there would be a problem with my body?" A bitter smile appeared on Luo Li's face as she sighed, "Yao Yao, you're the clearest about your body's condition. You were alone in the past, so there wouldn't be any problems. However, your husband is here, and the two of you are living together." The Divine Master knew that Ji Tianqing was here, so he had a bad premonition. Therefore, he sent me to see you. I didn't expect the Divine Master to be right. Hearing her words, Yun Yao frowned and asked in disbelief, "Luo Li, do you mean that my body's condition is related to Tianqing?" "Of course." Luo Li nodded and asked in a low voice, "Yao Yao, there are no outsiders here. Let me ask you. Have you consummated your marriage with young Master Ji?" This. Yun Yao's expression was a little unnatural, and she said in a strange tone, "Tianqing is my husband. It's natural for me to consummate my marriage with him." Sigh. Luo Li sighed and revealed an expression that said, "I knew it. Yao Yao, if your soul was normal, it wouldn't be a problem for you to consummate your marriage with young Master Ji. However, you should be clear about your soul's condition. Before your soul recovers, you can't consummate your marriage. You must maintain your virginity. Otherwise, you will end up like this." Hearing her words, Yun Yao understood the reason for her body's problem. Granny Long's face was also full of worry, and she said earnestly, "Yun Yao, half a month ago, this old one reported to the God Lord about Ji Tianqing. At that time, the Divine Master was worried that there would be a problem, so he sent Divine Official Luo to check on the situation. I brought you to the Ice Spirit Cave to cultivate so that you can temporarily separate from Ji Tianqing, so as to avoid any more serious consequences. But I didn't expect that you would have already." Sigh. Although Luo Li and Grandma Long's hearts were heavy, Yun Yao didn't have the slightest bit of regret. She calmly looked at the two of them and comforted them, "Luo Li, Grandma Long, you don't have to worry about me. My body is fine. I'll be fine after resting for a while." Luo Li waved her hand and said in a serious tone, "Yao Yao, don't jump to conclusions so quickly. I'll check your body first and make sure of the situation before we talk." With that, she took out a dark gold medicine box from her spatial ring. After opening the medicine box, she took out a green-skinned gourd, a bag of golden divine needles, and a palm-sized black turtle shell. Then, she formed a spell with both hands and shot out a ray of white light. It was like a thread that entered Yunyao's body. Then, she used the golden divine needles to open the green-skinned gourd and released a drop of 5-color divine liquid. Luoli was busy for 15 minutes before she finally found out about Yunyao's condition. She slowly stopped and put away the medicine box. Then, she looked at Yunyao with a serious expression. Yao Yao, your situation is very dangerous. You have to be treated in time. Otherwise, the consequences will be unimaginable. When she finished speaking, the door was pushed open by Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing's thick eyebrows were tightly knitted. He stepped into the room with a worried expression and asked, Divine Official Luo, what's wrong with Yao Yao? Luoli glanced at him and said in a low voice, Since you've heard it, I'll tell you the truth. Yin Yao's innate soul is missing, so her lifespan is limited. Her body's condition is different from ordinary people. If she keeps her virginity, she'll be fine. Before she reaches the end of her lifespan, she can fuse with a new divine pearl and extend her lifespan. But now, the two of you are in the same room. The balance of her body is broken, and there's a problem with her soul. Now, her 3 spiritual souls and 2 physical souls have been separated. So, she often faints, and her soul is in great pain. Moreover, her soul will backfire, and it will constantly devour her magic power and primordial spirit. If we don't treat her in time, her power will quickly decline, and her primordial spirit will gradually disappear. Luo Li's expression and tone became more and more serious as she spoke. Ji Tianqing and Grandma Long also looked worried. Everyone was silent for a moment. The atmosphere in the room was heavy and depressing. Ji Tianqing looked at Luo Li expectantly and asked, Divine Official Luo, you're the Divine Master's female official. You're proficient in medicine. Do you have any way to treat Yunyao? Luo Li thought for a moment and said, The most important thing now is to find some top-notch elixirs that can stabilize the soul and nourish the primordial spirit. First, we have to stabilize Yunyao's soul and primordial spirit. Then, I have to go back to the God's kingdom and report Yunyao's situation to the Divine Master. With the Divine Master's permission, I can open the treasury and take out a dozen top-notch treasures to refine healing elixirs for Yunyao. However, this process is very long. It will take more than 20 days to go back and forth from here to the God's kingdom. It will take me 4 months or even half a year to refine a saint-grade elixir. However, with Yunyao's body condition, I'm afraid it won't last that long. Grandma Long was stunned when she heard this. Then, she quickly asked Luo Li, Divine Official Luo, there are a few top-notch treasures in the treasury of the Luoshan Mountain. I'll go get them now and help Yunyao stabilize her soul. Luo Li raised her eyebrows and asked, Which treasures? Grandma Long quickly replied, There's divine moon grass, withered heart golden orchid, pure sun transverse fruit. She named 6 or 7 heavenly materials and earthly treasures in one breath. However, after Luo Li heard this, she shook her head with a face full of regret. Grandma Long, these treasures all have different effects, but none of them can stabilize a soul's injury. What should we do? Grandma Long immediately frowned and said anxiously, Where am I supposed to find these treasures in such a hurry? Just as everyone was filled with anxiety and was at their wits' end, Ji Tianqing took out a red spiritual fruit from his interspatial ring and handed it to Luo Li, Divine Official Luo. Use this red fruit to stabilize Yao Yao's soul's injury first. Luo Li's gaze fell on the red fruit. After looking at it carefully, a surprised expression appeared on her face. It really is a red fruit. Moreover, it's a top-notch red fruit. This is great. Not only can the divine red fruit increase one's cultivation and nourish the soul, but it can also increase the aptitude of the soul. This is the treasure that Yunyao needs the most. Especially this top-notch red fruit. It needs to grow for 1,000 years before it matures. Its effect is 5 times stronger than an ordinary red fruit. Ji Tianqing, where did you get such a top-notch red fruit? Chapter 1695. Since Luoli asked, Ji Tianqing didn't plan to hide it. This vermilion fruit was given to me by the old man before I left the ruins of God. Luo Li's eyes flashed as she looked at Ji Tianqing meaningfully. That's right. She had also heard of Ji Tianqing being chosen by the old man of the divine ruins. Although she didn't know the details, she knew what it meant for Ji Tianqing to be chosen by the old man. Luo Li took the vermilion fruit and said to Granny Long, "Granny, please go to the treasury of the Luotian mountain and take out the purple heart grass, golden leaf lotus, thunder fire pill, and glazed red sandalwood. I want to use these 4 supplementary herbs to help Yunyao absorb the vermilion fruit's medicinal energy. Only then can the vermilion fruit's effects be maximized." When Granny Long heard this, she quickly nodded in agreement. She turned and left the room, rushing towards the treasury. Luo Li then said to Ji Tianqing and Yunyao, "Yao Yao, young Master Ji, although this vermilion fruit can protect Yao Yao's safety in the short term, it's not a long-term solution. Young Master Ji, if you really want to protect Yao Yao, you have to control yourself in the future. Before Yao Yao's 7 spirits return, you can't sleep with her. That's harming her." Ji Tianqing nodded and asked, "Divine Official Luo, you mean to say that if we want to solve Yao Yao's problem, we have to help her gather her 7 spirits?" "Yes." Luo Li nodded and explained, "Normal people have 3 spiritual souls and 7 physical souls. Their souls are stable and flawless, but Yao Yao only has 3 spiritual souls and 2 physical souls. It's extremely unstable." Ji Tianqing nodded and said in a low voice, "If that's the case, then I'll do my best to find the other 5 Neptunian divine pearls as soon as possible and help Yao Yao gather her 7 spirits." 5 Neptunian divine pearls? Luo Li frowned and looked at Ji Tianqing strangely. "Young Master Ji, you probably have some misunderstanding about the divine pearls. You don't understand them well enough, right? Yao Yao's first spirit was formed from the Neptunian divine pearl. But the second pearl she fused with wasn't called the Neptunian divine pearl, but star. The other 5 divine beads also had different names and contained different laws and powers, such as longevity, nirvana, heaven and earth." "Oh. So that's how it is." Ji Tianqing revealed a surprised expression as he looked at Luo Li. He knew Luo Shui Luo knew the divine pearls of the divine pearls. Since Luo knew, Luo Li knew it was Luo Li. Since martial god Luo Shui was willing to tell Luo Li such a secret, it could be seen how much martial god Luo Shui trusted and relied on her. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing tried to ask, "Divine Official Luo, I'm new here, so I'm not familiar with the situation in the Luo River God Nation. Even if I wanted to find the other 5 divine pearls, I didn't know where to start. Do you know any information or clues? I'll be grateful if you can tell me." Luo Li frowned and thought for a while. Countless pieces of information flashed through her mind. After a long while, a thought suddenly flashed through her mind as she recalled a piece of information. "Oh right, I remember now. There's an extremely strange place. It's called the 100-Flower Valley. It's said that divine light often flashes in the valley. It's fleeting and makes countless people guess. However, the 100-Flower Valley's terrain is dangerous and mysterious. In a year, the 100-Flower Valley is hidden and invisible most of the time. It's impossible to find. I've analyzed the various legends and phenomena of the 100-Flower Valley. There must be a divine item there. It might be related to the divine pearls. Young Master Ji, if you don't mind, you can try your luck there." After she finished, Ji Tianqing asked without any hesitation, "Divine Official Luo, may I ask where the 100-Flower Valley is? Do you have a map or a route?" Luo Li rummaged through her space ring for a while and found an old yellow map. She handed it to Ji Tianqing. "I do have a map. It's not too difficult to find. It's in the Phantom Mountain range of the mysterious Frost Empire. It'll take about half a month from Luotian Mountain to the Phantom Mountain range of the mysterious Frost Empire." Before Luo Li could finish, Yunyao shook her head and said to Ji Tianqing, "Tianqing, I forbid you to go. The Phantom Mountain range is one of the most dangerous places in the Divine Kingdom. Demons and monsters run rampant there. It's very dangerous and mysterious. Not to mention that we're only in the primordial soul realm. Even a tribulation realm powerhouse might lose his life if he rashly enters the Phantom Mountain range. Luo Li also showed an apologetic look to Ji Tianqing. She nodded and said, "Young Master Ji, Yao Yao is right. In the past few thousand years, many warriors have entered the Phantom Mountain range. However, 8 or 9 out of 10 of them had either gone missing or lost their lives. Very few of them have come out alive, and very few of them have gained anything. Over time, the Phantom Mountain range's notoriety has spread far and wide. Fewer and fewer warriors have gone there to explore and adventure." Ji Tianqing listened quietly, but he still insisted on his opinion. He said in a firm tone, "Yao Yao, no matter how dangerous the Phantom Mountain range is, I have to go there. As long as there's a glimmer of hope that I can help you find the Divine Pearl, I won't give up. Even if I have to climb a mountain of swords or dive into a sea of fire, I won't back down. Just like when I helped you find the Sun Moon Divine Pearl in the Sun Moon Furnace. The Sun Moon Furnace is the most dangerous place in the world. When have I ever been afraid of it? But I don't want you to risk your life." Yin Yao frowned and looked at Ji Tianqing. Her eyes were full of worry. Ji Tianqing walked to her and held her weak hands. He said in a gentle but firm tone, "Yao Yao, don't try to persuade me anymore. I've made up my mind. You just focus on healing your body and wait for my good news." Yin Yao considered for a while. She looked at him and said in an unquestionable tone, "Tianqing, if you insist on going, I won't stop you. But I want to go with you. We, husband and wife, will share blessings and hardships together. No matter what kind of difficulties we face, we will face them together." Ji Tianqing knew her well. He knew that she was soft on the outside but tough on the inside. Once she had made up her mind, she wouldn't change her mind easily. After hesitating for a while, he nodded and said, "Okay, I promise you." Luo Li stood at the side and watched the scene quietly. Her eyes flashed with a strange light as she sighed in her heart. At this moment, she finally understood why Yin Yao was so loyal to Ji Tianqing and treated him as her own life. If there was a handsome and talented young man who loved me so much and didn't hesitate to sacrifice everything to protect me, I'm afraid that I would fall into his hands and treat him as the closest person to me. I wouldn't hold anything back, right? This thought flashed in Luo Li's mind. She looked at Ji Tianqing with a gentle gaze. Unknowingly, her impression of Ji Tianqing had changed. Chapter 1696. Not long after, Granny Long returned with 4 types of elixirs and gave them to Luo Li. Luo Li took out a Saint-grade pill furnace and started to refine the elixirs on the spot. Under her control, the 4 types of elixirs fused with the vermilion fruit, catalyzing the effects of the vermilion fruit. 6 hours later, she refined a dark red pill and gave it to Yin Yao to consume. After Yin Yao consumed the pill, the elixir spread throughout her body, quickly healing her soul and stabilizing it. Luo Li personally used her boundless magic power to help Yin Yao heal her injuries. Ji Tianqing and Granny Long waited outside the room. Unknowingly, half a day passed. When night fell, Luo Li finished her cultivation and opened the door. Ji Tianqing and Granny Long hurriedly entered the room and saw Yin Yao lying on the bed, sleeping peacefully. Her breathing was stable, and her furrowed brows were relaxed. Obviously, she was no longer in pain. Ji Tianqing hurriedly asked Luo Li, "Divine Official Luo, how are Yao Yao's injuries?" Luo Li revealed a gratified smile and nodded. "That vermilion fruit is very old, and its effects are very powerful. It has already helped Yao Yao stabilize her soul and heal her injuries. At least for the next 4 months, Yao Yao's injuries won't relapse, and she won't suffer any backlash. Don't worry." Ji Tianqing heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly bowed to her. He said in a sincere tone, "Thank you, Divine Official Luo, for saving my life." "I can't thank you enough." Luo Li gently shook her head and said in a gentle tone, "You don't have to thank me. Yin Yao and I are like sisters. Saving her is my duty. Moreover, if it wasn't for your vermilion fruit, I wouldn't have been able to do anything. Yao Yao is asleep now, so don't disturb her. She will wake up in about 2 days. I still have to rush back to the God Kingdom to report this matter to the Divine Master and prepare to refine elixirs for Yao Yao. I won't accompany you. As she spoke, Luoli put away the medicine box and pill cauldron and was about to leave. Ji Tianqing and Granny Long walked her out of the room. Arriving at the entrance of the Cloud Water Palace, Luoli stopped in her tracks. With a solemn expression, she exhorted, "Oh right, young Master Ji, if possible, try not to let Yao Yao go to the Mirage Mountain Range. For the next few months, it's best to let her recuperate in the palace. Try your best not to engage in any fights, so as to avoid any accidents that might cause injuries." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "I will try my best to persuade him. Goodbye." Luoli didn't say anything more. She cupped her hands towards him and Granny Long before turning around and flying into the sky. After a short 10 breaths, her figure disappeared into the horizon. After sending Luoli off, Granny Long said a few words to Ji Tianqing before taking her leave. Ji Tianqing returned to his residence alone. He stayed in the bedroom and guarded Yunyao closely. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. On the morning of the 3rd day, the sun had just risen. A ray of warm sunlight shone into the room through the window. Ji Tianqing sat by the bed and meditated, constantly paying attention to Yunyao's movements. At this moment, Yunyao, who had slept for 2 days and 2 nights, finally woke up. She slowly opened her eyes and saw Ji Tianqing sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at her with tender eyes. "Yao Yao, are you feeling better?" Yunyao slowly sat up and sensed her body's condition. She nodded and said, "I've already recovered. Furthermore, my cultivation has increased tremendously. I've reached a bottleneck and will soon break through." "Yes, this is the effect of the vermilion fruit." Ji Tianqing explained, "The effects of the supreme grade vermilion fruit are the strongest. Not only can it help you stabilize your soul and heal your injuries, it can also increase your cultivation greatly. If you absorb all of the vermilion fruit's medicinal essence, you might not only break through to the 8th level of the primordial spirit realm, but you might even reach the 9th level." Yunyao revealed a gratified expression and said gently, "Tianqing, thank you. There's no need for thanks between us." Ji Tianqing said with a playful smile, "I wanted to leave alone and go to the Phantom Mountain range of the mysterious Frost Empire while you were asleep. But I know your nature. After you wake up, you will definitely blame me for making the decision without your permission." Yunyao revealed a faint smile and rolled her eyes at him. "Humph, at least you know your place and didn't make the decision without my permission. If you leave me and go to the Phantom Mountain range alone, I will definitely chase after you." Ji Tianqing took her hand and discussed business with her. "Yao Yao, rest for another day. We will prepare and set off for the Phantom Mountain range tomorrow." Yunyao thought for a moment and shook her head. "I'm fine now. My strength is at its peak. I can set off immediately. However, for safety reasons, we have to bring Jinlong and Black Eagle. With them protecting us, the chances of exploring the 100 Flowers Valley will be higher." "Okay, we'll do as you say." Ji Tianqing nodded in agreement. Then, Yunyao got up and walked out of the room to instruct Black Eagle and Jinlong. Ji Tianqing also made some preparations and woke up Qian Yu, who was cultivating. Back in the vast divine kingdom, Qian Yu had swallowed the Moon Fox clan's divine moonstone and had been in a deep sleep. It had been 3 months since the incident. Now that Qian Yu had woken up, it had been cultivating in seclusion to refine the divine power in the divine moonstone. Its strength had also increased by dozens of times. It had reached the 4th level of the Essence Soul realm. After Ji Tianqing explained the situation to it, it carried Ji Tianqing, Yunyao, Black Eagle, and Jinlong out of the Cloud Water Palace. After flying out of the Luotian Mountain, Qian Yu flapped its wings and flew east at lightning speed. The mysterious Frost Empire was located in the east of the Luotian Mountain. During the journey, Black Eagle and Golden Dragon guarded Yunyao closely, vigilantly watching their surroundings. Yunyao and Ji Tianqing sat side by side on Qian Yu's back as they discussed the Mirage Mountain Range. The Mirage Mountain Range was one of the infamous danger zones in the Luoshui Divine Kingdom. Yunyao had some understanding of the region, so she told Ji Tianqing everything she knew. For 15 days, Qian Yu traveled without stopping, not knowing what fatigue was. That evening, the group finally arrived at the Mirage Mountain Range. Qian Yu was flying above a vast grassland. 300 miles in front of it was an endless mountain range. Looking down from high in the sky, one could see huge mountain ranges that resembled gigantic dragons lying on the ground. Almost every mountain range was boundless, extending from north to south. The dark green mountain ranges were covered in lush primitive forests. It was difficult to see any exposed rocks or soil. Between the mountains was a dense forest. All of them were ancient trees that reached 1,000 feet tall. Occasionally, flocks of birds would appear between the mountain ranges. They were as fast as lightning, disappearing in a flash. The sky above the mountains was covered in a thick light blue fog, obscuring the depths of the mountain range. Ji Tianqing stared at the mountain range for a moment before his eyes turned grave. He could sense that the seemingly peaceful Mirage Mountain Range was hiding countless ferocious and savage demon beasts. Chapter 1697. After Qian Yu entered the Mirage Mountain Range, he flew straight ahead. According to Luo Li's description and the route on the map, Centauria Valley was located in the central region of the Mirage Mountain Range. With Qian Yu's speed, it would take him a day and a night to reach the vicinity of Centauria Valley. While flying above the mountain range, Qian Yu clearly slowed down and appeared very cautious. The Black Eagle and Golden Dragon no longer stayed on his back. They flew to the left and right respectively, vigilantly observing their surroundings. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao also drew their respective swords. They stood side by side on Qian Yu's back and looked at the mountains ahead. The first few hours were relatively peaceful and smooth. Even if there were powerful fey beasts or beast hordes in the mountain range, they were intimidated by Qian Yu's aura and did not dare to attack. However, as time passed, the group entered the depths of the Mirage Mountain Range and began to encounter danger. The first time they encountered danger was in the valley between two mountain ranges. In the deep valley, there were two giant flying apes lurking. They occupied the entire area. They had strength at the fifth firmament essence soul realm and were extremely bloodthirsty and battle-hungry. They had rich combat experience. When they sensed the immense divine power in Qian Yu's body, they could not suppress their bloodthirst and launched a brazen attack. This time, there was no need for Ji Tianqing and Yunyao to take action. The Black Eagle and Golden Dragon were the first to discover the danger. In just a few moves, they killed 3 giant flying apes. Ji Tianqing observed the duo's moves and mystic techniques and discovered that they had strength at the 8th firmament essence soul realm. They had mastered powerful mystic techniques. They were more than enough to deal with warriors or fey beasts below the tribulation transcendence realm. After dealing with the giant flying apes, the group continued on their journey. About 2 hours later, Qian Yu flew over a 10,000-foot tall mountain. Danger approached once again. A flock of dark gold wind-concealing golden condors chased after them from behind and attacked them from all sides. There were 28 wind-concealing golden condors in this flock. Furthermore, they had strength at the 2nd firmament essence soul realm and above. Every wind-concealing golden condor had a body 100 feet long. When their massive golden wings spread, they were 200 feet wide. They were extremely fast, like golden streams of light that shimmered in the dusky sky. Their attack power was extremely strong, and they knew how to surround each other and cover each other. Although the Black Eagle and the Golden Dragon were loyal to their master and fought desperately against the attack of the group of eagles. But with their strength, it was impossible for them to solve the problem quickly. Hence, Ji Tianqing, Yunyao, and Qian Yu all retaliated. Ji Tianqing used the star-shattering fist with his left hand, sending out a dazzling fist light. Each fist light was able to blast apart a wind-concealing golden eagle. He waved the sword of burial of heaven with his right hand and slashed out a giant golden sword that was over 100 feet long, quickly killing those golden eagles. Under his fist and sword, none of the wind concealment golden eagles could withstand a single move. They were all killed instantly. Yin Yao was the same. She waved her heavenly ice divine sword and used a mysterious sword technique to kill the wind concealment golden condors one after another. The two of them calmly stood in the sky, attacking and defending each other. Their coordination was incomparable. No matter how the wind shelter golden eagle attacked, it could not pose a threat to the two of them. Instead, their Dharma spell attacks quickly killed the group of wind concealment golden eagles. The dazzling sword light and the dazzling Dharma spell light intertwined and converged into a colorful glow that covered a radius of dozens of miles. A series of muffled sounds reverberated in the sky like muffled thunder. The wind concealment golden eagles kept screaming and wailing. One after another, they died and were beheaded into pieces of flesh and blood that scattered among the mountains. Qian Yu's performance was also very heroic. Ji Tianqing was impressed. This was the first time it had killed an enemy after breaking through to the essence soul realm. Its power was very vast, as if it was endless. Its speed was also as fast as a stream of light. Every time it released a sky full of ice arrows and blue blades, it would always be able to kill a golden eagle. This battle only lasted for 100 breaths of time before it ended. The 28 wind concealment golden eagles were all killed. Not a single one escaped. After the battle ended, Ji Tianqing was not in a hurry to leave. He asked the Black Eagle and the Golden Dragon to help him pick up countless essence soul fragments from the devastated battlefield. Those were the essence soul fragments of the wind concealment golden eagles. If left alone, they would dissipate into the world in a few days. However, after Ji Tianqing obtained more than 200 essence soul fragments, he gave them to the burial of heaven. The burial of heaven could devour the essence soul fragments and absorb their power to slowly recover its vitality. After collecting the spoils of war, Ji Tianqing rode Qian Yu and continued to travel in the sky. However, in the battle just now, more than 20 wind concealment golden eagles were killed. Their corpses were turned into pieces of flesh and blood that scattered in the mountains. The commotion of the battle awakened the monsters in the surrounding hundreds of miles. The smell of blood that filled the air stimulated the ferocity of many monsters. As soon as Ji Tianqing and the others left, dozens of monsters swarmed from all directions and began to hunt them down. The monsters that could survive in the depths of the Phantom Mountains were basically at the spirit cultivation realm and above. They had lived for hundreds or thousands of years. The powerful monsters that ruled the territories were all at the essence soul realm. These demonic beasts usually fought with each other, or fought for territory, or snatched spirit veins, treasured lands, and resources. But now, they were united against a common enemy. They saw Ji Tianqing and the others as invaders and worked together to hunt them down. Qian Yu sped through the sky for thousands of miles. In the sky behind him, there was a mighty team. There were at least 200 demonic beasts that had joined in the chase. They were all filled with killing intent. Seeing this, Qian Yu was a little angry and said with murderous intent, "Old Ji, those lowly monsters are really reckless. Why don't we kill them all?" Ji Tianqing shook his head and said indifferently, "It's easy to kill those monsters, but this is the Phantom Mountains. There are too many unknown dangers. If we fight with those monsters, we will definitely be besieged and fall into a difficult battle. By then, more monsters will be alerted and the battle will never stop. It's meaningless and a waste of time. Our main goal is to find the 100-Flower Valley as soon as possible." Qian Yu nodded slightly and said regretfully, "All right, those monsters are lucky. We'll spare their lives for now." Then, he sped up and flew through the sky, rushing to the 100-Flower Valley. Half an hour later, the mighty hunting team was shaken off by it. However, the deeper they went into the mountains, the more dangers they encountered. For the next half a day, they would be attacked by a group of monsters every few tens of thousands of miles. The continuous bloody battles made Qian Yu, Black Eagle, and Golden Dragon bloodthirsty. Their bodies were covered in blood and looked particularly ferocious. Most of it was the blood of monsters, but they were also heavily injured. By the next morning, they had already fought more than 20 battles and killed more than 600 demonic beasts. Everyone's magic power was depleted and they were exhausted. Chapter 1698. On a lush mountain peak. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao sat on a large rock, cleaning the blood and stains on their bodies. Both of them had consumed a lot of their dermic powers, so they took pills to recover their dermic powers. However, Ji Tianqing had gained a lot. He had obtained hundreds of demon beast essence soul fragments. He had given these essence soul fragments to the burial of heaven, which could help the burial of heaven recover a lot of its dermic powers. In the forest not far away, the golden dragon and the black eagle were sitting under a towering ancient tree, leaning against the tree trunk. Both of them were stained with blood, their hair was messy, and there were at least a dozen wounds on their bodies. They looked quite miserable. Their dermic powers were almost exhausted. The light in their eyes was dim, and their breathing was a little chaotic. Fighting more than 20 battles in a row had almost exhausted their mental and physical strength. Now, they urgently needed to rest. They needed to recuperate for at least a few days to recover. Further away, Qian Yu was sitting on a branch of a towering ancient tree, looking around. At this time, its body had shrunk countless times. It was only 3 feet long. The previous battle had also caused it some minor injuries, and it had consumed a lot of its energy. However, its recovery ability was very strong. Its injuries were quickly healed, and its energy was quickly replenished. Now that Ji Tianqing and the others were resting on the mountain peak, it was on guard for them. However, no one saw that there were 2 pairs of cold, bloodthirsty eyes secretly watching them from the depths of the forest. They were 200-meter long, green snake-shaped demon beasts. On the surface, they looked like 2 huge pythons with strong and slender bodies, flat and wide heads, and bloody mouths. The green snakes' bodies were as rough as the bark of an old tree. The patterns on their bodies were messy, and they were covered with wash-basin-sized scales. On their flat triangular heads, there was a protruding black horn, which glowed with a cold light. They had a special innate ability that allowed them to hide in the dense forest, and they were invisible. As they moved through the forest, they did not make any sound or aura. 2 pairs of cold, green eyes stared at the mountain peak, revealing a strong murderous intent. 5 kilometers, 8 kilometers, 5 kilometers. 2 green pythons were rapidly approaching the peak of the mountain, heading toward Ji Tianqing and the others. In a short span of 10 breaths, the 2 green pythons arrived at the peak of the mountain. They couldn't wait to launch an attack. Their main target was Qian Yu, who was sitting on the tree branch. The divine power fluctuations emanating from Qian Yu's body had a fatal attraction to them. The green python on the left raised its head, its black horn glowing with a dark light, releasing 3 sharp and narrow light blades. Each of the light blades was over 30 meters long, and they were so condensed that they seemed to be solid, like an indestructible giant spear. Swish! Swish! In the blink of an eye, 3 giant black spears appeared in front of Qian Yu and enveloped its body. It immediately sensed the approaching danger. Its body instantly curled up into a ball and turned into an icy blue stream of light, flying to the side. However, no matter how fast its reaction was, it was still 1 step too slow. Peng peng peng. 2 of the 3 pitch-black giant spears missed their target and struck the towering ancient tree. One of the giant spears hit Qian Yu on the spot and sent it tumbling away, letting out a painful groan. It flew thousands of meters in the air before falling into the depths of the forest. Following the deafening explosion, a black shockwave exploded from the peak of the mountain and spread out in all directions. Dozens of towering ancient trees were blown to smithereens on the spot, turning into fine wood shavings. A few huge craters were formed on the ground, and sand and dust were splashed everywhere. The entire 1,000-foot-tall mountain shook violently from the impact of the terrifying power. The sudden change broke the tranquility of the mountain. Ji Tianqing immediately became alert and shouted with a vigilant look, "Demon beast attack, everyone be careful." Almost as soon as his voice rang out, the other green python opened its bloody mouth and released two dark green light pillars, one for the golden dragon and the other for the black eagle. The golden dragon and the black eagle had just sensed the danger and were about to launch a counterattack with their weapons. Peng peng. With two dull explosions, the two of them were hit by the dark green light pillars and were sent tumbling away. Two more huge craters appeared in the forest on the peak of the mountain. The violent shockwave exploded and swept across a radius of more than 10 miles, blasting all the towering ancient trees on the peak of the mountain into pieces. At this moment, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao had already flown into the sky with their swords in hand. Ji Tianqing's eyes and divine sense had also locked onto the two green pythons' auras and determined their location. Damned animals! He roared with a murderous aura and swung the sword of burial of heaven with all his strength, slashing out 7 dark golden sword auras toward the two pythons. 7 Stars Sword. The golden sword auras pierced through the sky, passing through the dust and debris in the sky and instantly hitting the two pythons. Peng peng, a few muffled sounds burst out, and the two green pythons were sent flying. However, the tough scales on their bodies blocked most of the sword auras and neutralized most of the power. After being knocked back 1,000 feet, they twisted their bodies and flew into the sky, charging toward Qianyu as fast as lightning. Their goal was very clear. They wanted to kill Qianyu and steal his divine power and bloodline. Qianyu had just climbed up from the rubble when he saw the two pythons charging toward him. Therefore, his body flashed with icy blue light and immediately expanded to a length of 1,000 feet. The 12 furry icy blue tails also released an overwhelming amount of icy blue blades of light towards the two giant pythons. Peng 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 peng. With a series of dull explosions, the two sides engaged in a fierce battle in the sky. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ji Tianqing rushed to the nearby rubble and rescued the golden dragon and the black eagle. The golden dragon and the black eagle were already severely injured. After being attacked by the green pythons, their injuries worsened and they became even more miserable. The two of them endured their injuries and pain and still wanted to fight bravely. However, Ji Tianqing stopped them and put them into the sword world so that they could recuperate. After settling the golden dragon and the black eagle, Ji Tianqing held the burial of heaven's sword and charged toward the two pythons with murderous intent. Yunyao had already made her move. She waved her sword and stabbed at one of the pythons like a net of swords. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Dozens of incomparably sharp cold lights pierced the two giant pythons one after another. However, the bodies of the two giant pythons trembled and emitted a dark green light, but they were not injured at all. With Yunyao's strength, she could not pose a threat to the two pythons. Noticing this, Ji Tianqing frowned. A cold light flashed in his eyes. This was because he realized that the two pythons' strength had surpassed the essence soul realm. They had reached the first stage of the tribulation transcendence realm. They were no longer ordinary pythons. They were evil dragons that had undergone the baptism of the heavenly tribulation and had completed their evolution. Ji Tianqing had to be alert and fight with all his might. Chapter 1699. Following Ji Tianqing's roar, the giant golden sword that was hundreds of meters long slashed down from the sky. An evil dragon was attacking Qianyu fiercely, sending Qianyu flying again. Before it could chase after Qianyu, it was hit by the giant golden sword and smashed into the mountain peak from the sky. A huge crack suddenly appeared on the mountain peak that was full of scars, and dust splashed out into the air. A deep wound appeared on the evil dragon's body, and dark green venom and blood splattered out. In pain, it opened its bloody mouth and let out an angry roar. Yunyao took the opportunity to use her ultimate skill and slashed out a crescent light blade that was hundreds of meters long. Crescent light sky attack. The silver-white sword light was like a crescent moon falling from the sky, striking the evil dragon with a loud bang. Bam! The evil dragon was hit hard again and smashed into the ruins. Its wound was even bigger. The other evil dragon quickly rushed over and helped its companion to block Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao's joint attack. The two sides fought fiercely in the sky. Numerous light blades collided fiercely, exploding with a loud, muffled sound that reverberated in the sky. Dazzling golden, blue, and green lights lit up the dark sky. Violent shockwaves swept across the entire mountain peak like a hurricane, blowing up dust and stone fragments. Qian Yu, who was severely injured, wandered around the edge of the battlefield, looking for an opportunity to launch a surprise attack. It attacked a few times, and the innate abilities and secret skills it released all hit the two evil dragons. Unfortunately, the difference in strength between it and the two evil dragons was too big, and it could not threaten them. On the other hand, the two evil dragons' counterattacks could always send Qian Yu flying after hitting it, and its injuries became even worse. There were a few new wounds on its body that was hundreds of meters long. Blood gushed out like spring water and dyed its icy blue hair. Qian Yu's strength was fading. It panted heavily, and its speed became slower and slower. When it was sent flying again by the evil dragons, a huge bloody hole appeared on its back, revealing its white bones. The evil flood dragon's secret attack also contained dark green venom. The poison had corroded Qian Yu's wounds and was quickly eating away at his flesh. Half of his body was paralyzed and he could not move. It had to heal itself as soon as possible and get rid of the poison in its body. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Unfortunately, the two evil flood dragons were coming at him with such ferocious momentum that they didn't give him any time to breathe. Soon, the overwhelming light blades and poisonous water columns were about to drown it. However, it had nowhere to hide and was about to suffer. At this critical juncture, Ji Tianqing finally arrived. He spread his large golden wings and stood in front of Qian Yu. Peng peng peng. The overwhelming light blades and poisonous water pillars struck the pair of golden wings, causing a loud explosion. The golden wings were completely unscathed and were still shining with a dazzling golden light. Ji Tianqing successfully blocked the attacks of the two flood dragons and took the opportunity to save Qian Yu and put it into the sword world. Qian Yu, go back and heal yourself quickly. I will take care of these two flood dragons. With Qian Yu's strength, it wouldn't be of much help if he continued to fight. Instead, his life would be in danger. If he returned to the sword world to heal himself, Ji Tianqing would be able to fight freely without any scruples. Soon, 100 breaths passed. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao joined forces and fought with the two flood dragons for more than 100 times. The two sides fought back and forth and the fight was extremely intense. Danger was everywhere. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were extremely talented and had mastered all kinds of mysterious secret techniques. They kept using all kinds of secret techniques and beat the two flood dragons until they were covered in wounds. Blood splattered everywhere. As for themselves, they were protected by powerful Dharma treasures and didn't suffer too much damage. Suddenly, Ji Tianqing seized an opportunity and decisively swung the sword of burial of heaven. A dazzling cold light appeared. Cold sea. Pung. With a muffled sound, the flood dragon that was more seriously injured was hit by the sword light. The sword light happened to hit a wound on its tail and cut off its tail on the spot. A 10-meter-long broken tail was wrapped in a large puff of green liquid and blood and flew into the sky. The extreme pain caused the evil flood dragon to let out a painful roar. It opened its bloody mouth recklessly and released a poisonous fog that covered the sky and the sun, covering a radius of 10 miles. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao had special physiques and were not afraid of the corrosion of hundreds of poisons. Ji Tianqing took this opportunity to hold the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and slashed with all his strength. Sky-splitting sword. He unleashed his strongest power and slashed out a giant sword that was hundreds of feet long towards the flood dragon. Kaboom! An earth-shattering sound exploded. The flood dragon's head was cut off and it fell from the sky into the ruins. Its flat and hard head was actually slashed into two, and its body was obliterated on the spot. Countless pieces of flesh mixed with venom and blood splattered in all directions. Swoosh! A green snake-shaped primordial spirit flew out of the corpse and fled to the eastern sky in panic. The other evil flood dragon was also heavily injured. Seeing that its companion's body was cut in half and only a primordial spirit was left, it panicked and quickly turned to escape. You still want to escape? Don't even think about it. A cold light flashed in Ji Tianqing's eyes, and he chased after it with a murderous aura. He used the divine concealment step, and his figure flickered in the sky a few times before he caught up with the snake-shaped primordial spirit. Star-shattering fist. He shouted angrily, raised his left palm, and blasted out a silver fist light. The fist shadow that was as huge as a house, with the power to destroy the world, smashed into the snake-shaped primordial spirit. The green snake primordial spirit was blasted into pieces on the spot and scattered in the sky. The primordial spirit fragments of the tribulation stage flood dragon are stronger than the primordial spirits of ordinary demonic beasts, and their effects are also more powerful, Ji Tianqing thought to himself. He waved his hand and shot out a big golden hand to collect all the primordial spirit fragments. Then, he continued to chase after the wounded flood dragon. He cut through the sky at lightning speed and flew to the east. The surviving flood dragon seemed to be scared out of its wits, and its speed was extremely fast. With the speed of Ji Tianqing and Yin Yao, they couldn't catch up with it for a while. After a full 100 breaths, the two sides chased each other in the sky for more than 300 miles. It was not until then that Ji Tianqing caught up with the flood dragon. However, just as he was about to attack, the flood dragon fell from the sky and drilled into a deep canyon. Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment. Only then did he see clearly that there was a deep and narrow canyon 10 miles in front of him. On the left and right sides of the canyon, there were towering mountains thousands of feet high. Above the canyon, there were layers of clouds and mist, and the air was filled with the strong fragrance of green wood. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing immediately slowed down and observed with a frown. Chapter 1700. They were surrounded by dark green forests and mountain ranges. Only the Grand Canyon was filled with colorful and dazzling scenes. Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment, but he immediately understood. That canyon should be the 100-flower valley we're looking for. Originally, they were already close to the 100-flower valley. But because they had fought too many battles and exhausted their strength, they decided to rest on the mountain peak. Who would have thought that after being attacked by the two flood dragons, they would stumble into the 100-flower valley? Ji Tianqing sneered and murmured to himself, I didn't expect that the two dragons that attacked us were demon beasts of the 100-flower valley. It seems that the rumors are true. Not only does the 100-flower valley have pleasant scenery, it also has fatal dangers and dangers. Yin Yao followed beside him and looked down at the 100-flower valley. After observing for a while, she reminded, Tianqing, look at the fog above the canyon. It's probably not ordinary fog. Ji Tianqing nodded. Yes, it should be poisonous fog. There are all kinds of strange flowers and plants in the 100-flower valley, most of which are poisonous. Although we have special constitutions and are immune to poison, we still have to be careful. While talking, he flew towards the 100-flower valley with Yun Yao. In just 10 breaths, the two landed in the deep 100-flower valley. The canyon was 50 kilometers wide and ran north-south. It was unknown how many kilometers long it was. There were majestic mountain ranges on both sides of the valley. Dark green vines and moss crawled on the steep cliffs. The soil on the ground was fertile and moist. It was dark red and gave off a strong smell of rot. Strange flowers of different colors were blooming in the surrounding flowers. Some of them even bore fruit. Clumps of dark red lotus flowers formed a red carpet with a radius of 3,000 meters. Bright red blood mandara flowers were clustered together, quietly blooming and emitting traces of the stench of blood. Budding white jade peony, light purple hyacinths, light yellow evening primroses, pink albizar were scattered on the ground. There were also many forsythia, purple tea, and rarely seen flowers and plants. It was also a scene of colorful flowers. Ji Tianqing flew into the depths of Flower Valley while observing the flowers and plants along the way. He discovered that more than 80% of the flowers and plants were spiritual medicines with extraordinary effects. But for some reason, all the flowers and plants in the Flower Valley were different from the spiritual herbs he knew. They seemed to have mutated and contained a strong poison. He told Yunyao about his discovery and said via voice transmission, "The flowers and plants in this place look like spirit herbs on the surface, but in fact, all of them are highly toxic." If an ignorant martial artist were to come here and suddenly discover so many precious spirit herbs, they would definitely pick them and then die from poisoning. Yunyao nodded slightly in agreement, and said with a serious expression, "Look at those flowers and plants, they are abnormally strong and tall. They have been growing for at least a few hundred years. If they didn't contain any toxicity, those spirit herbs were all top-notch medicinal herbs." No wonder Luoli said that there might be some kind of divine item hidden in the 100-Flower Valley. Only the power of a divine item can allow those ordinary flowers and plants to evolve into spirit herbs and grow for hundreds or thousands of years without withering. After pausing for a moment, she added, "The air is also filled with invisible poison that can erode and paralyze a martial artist's consciousness and soul. Although we can resist the corrosion of the poison, we can't stay here for too long. Otherwise, our consciousness and soul will also be damaged, leaving behind wounds that are difficult to heal. Also, I can vaguely feel that there is some kind of divine power in the depths of the valley, as if it is silently calling out to me." Ji Tianqing knew that Yunyao had fused with 2 divine pearls. As long as she was within the range of the divine pearls, she could sense and connect with them. It seems that Luo Li's deduction is correct. There might be a divine pearl hidden in the depths of 100-Flower Valley? Yunyao nodded, and a look of anticipation appeared in her eyes. "It should be so. But I don't understand. If there really is a divine pearl here, why would it be hidden here?" Ji Tianqing smiled and explained, "There's no need to dwell on the reason. As long as we can find the divine pearl, we will be extremely lucky. Perhaps the divine pearl was left here, or perhaps it was originally somewhere else and was brought here for some reason. After all, divine monarch Nacre Light has been dead for 30,000 years. In such a long time, the entire world has undergone tremendous changes. The world changes with each passing day. Therefore, it's not strange for the divine pearl to be scattered anywhere in the world." As they spoke, the 2 flew over the thousands of flowers and headed deep into Flower Valley. The deeper they went into Flower Valley, the more lush the flowers and plants on the ground became. Many of the flowers and plants had clearly mutated. Flowers and plants that were originally a foot tall could grow to 3 to 4 meters tall, like large trees. Many palm-sized flowers could grow to the size of a wash basin or even a millstone. Everything was mysterious and strange. What the 2 could confirm was that there was indeed a divine item hidden in the depths of Flower Valley. It was very likely the divine pearl that Yunyao needed. Ji Tianqing guessed that it was the power of the divine pearl that allowed the flowers and plants in this valley to bloom. Furthermore, the flowers and plants had evolved and mutated, growing for thousands of years. As for why the flowers had mutated from spiritual herbs to poisonous herbs, there was no way to know. Soon, 15 minutes passed. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao traversed more than 50 kilometers in Flower Valley and arrived at its depths. There was a thick fog above their heads. It combined with the power of heaven and earth to form a powerful array formation that sealed the entire Flower Valley. The poison in the air was even more intense, causing their consciousness to fade and making it difficult for them to concentrate. The various flowers and plants on the ground had also become stronger. They had evolved and mutated so much that it was difficult to recognize them. The surroundings were quiet. It was as silent as death. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao held their swords and slowed down as they vigilantly observed their surroundings. Suddenly, rustling sounds came from the dense flowers in front of them. A sharp gust of wind blew. The 2 immediately stopped flying and looked ahead with sharp gazes. Soon, a dense crowd of figures emerged from the lush flowers and flew into the sky. Ji Tianqing immediately saw them clearly. They were more than 20 strange-looking demon beasts. Some of the demon beasts were humanoid. They had 4 limbs and a head, but their true forms were furry beasts. There were also some demon beasts that looked like ferocious beasts. Their bodies were filled with a strong murderous aura, but their true forms were tree demons. The hair on their bodies was made of leaves and branches. There were also some demon beasts that were originally common birds and beasts that had evolved and mutated into ferocious and terrifying demon beasts. A total of 26 demon beasts stood in the sky and blocked Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao's path. Chapter 1701. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao gripped their swords tightly as they stared coldly at the fey beasts. The duo could tell that the fey beasts were at least at the 8th firmament essence soul realm. The strongest fey beasts had already reached the peak 9th firmament essence soul realm and were about to face a heavenly tribulation. Without a doubt, this pack of ferocious fey beasts possessed terrifying combat strength. The duo had to be careful or they might return in defeat. As Ji Tianqing observed the pack of fey beasts, he sent a voice transmission to Yun Yao. "Yao Yao, there's only one path to enter the depths of Centauria Valley. We have to charge our way in. When the battle begins, just hold the fort for me. Do not charge in. I suspect that there are far more fey beasts entrenched in Centauria Valley." Yun Yao nodded and asked with a voice transmission, "By the way, Tianqing, where's the little black dragon? How strong is it? Can it come out to help?" Ji Tianqing shook his head and said with a heavy expression, "I obtained a divine dragon crystal in the ruins of gods and gave it to the little black dragon. It is currently refining the divine dragon crystal and has been in a deep slumber. It has yet to awaken. We can only rely on ourselves for this battle." Yun Yao nodded slightly as her eyes turned solemn. More than 20 fey beasts stood in front of them, glaring at the duo. Their bodies emitted intense killing intent. However, they were highly intelligent. It was as though they were carrying out orders and were not in a hurry to attack. Upon seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing frowned and pondered for a moment. Suddenly, he thought of something. Could it be that this pack of fey beasts are just shrimp soldiers and crab generals? Do they have a stronger leader? Just as this thought flashed through his mind, a strong gust of wind came from deep within Centauria Valley. A rich floral fragrance wafted over. In a few short seconds, a gigantic figure flew out of the fog and arrived in the middle of the pack of fey beasts. Ji Tianqing focused his gaze and the first thing he saw was the azure wyrm that was covered in wounds. Its huge and sturdy body was originally covered with crisscrossing wounds and bloody holes, and its entire body was covered in blood. But now, the bloodstains all over its body had disappeared, and its wounds were gradually healing. Blood was no longer flowing out. It floated in midair, its flat head poking down and staring at Ji Tianqing. Its dark green eyes were filled with cold resentment. However, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao glanced at it, and their gazes fell on its back. On its broad back stood a huge figure that was 10 feet tall. It was a dark purple Yao Lord. It had the body of a human, but it had 4 muscular arms. Its body was very majestic. It was draped in a huge and tattered robe, and there were many rags hanging all over its body. Its head was like a strange purple flower, without a face or facial features. Without a doubt, it was a flower demon. On its left shoulder sat a petite banshee that looked like a human. The banshee was 2 meters tall, and her appearance was very similar to a human. She had a slim and healthy figure and a charming and beautiful face. She wore a light pink dress and had long dark green hair. She was barefooted and swayed her legs leisurely. After careful observation, Ji Tianqing discovered that this human-like woman was actually a flower demon. Moreover, there was a flower vine connecting her to the ugly flower demon. Her life force and dermic power aura were also connected. Both of their strengths had reached the 4th level of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing couldn't help but frown. He muttered softly, as the ancient saying goes, flowers bloom on the same stem and branches are intertwined. Could it be that these 2 flower demons evolved from a single flower on a stem? Yunyao nodded slightly and replied in a low voice, I think so. The flower on a stem is rare, and it's even rarer for both of them to evolve into flower demons. These two flower demons are very strong, and they must have powerful magical techniques. We have to be careful. As soon as she finished speaking, the charming flower demoness covered her mouth with her hand and giggled. He. I didn't expect that the two insects that came to die in the Flower Valley were a pair of beautiful people. For thousands of years, countless insects of the human race have entered the Flower Valley and become fertilizer for the flowers. It's the first time I've seen such a talented couple with outstanding talents like you. I'm really looking forward to grinding your bones and scattering your ashes. I'll mix it with your blood and sprinkle it in the Flower Valley. I wonder if it'll have a miraculous effect? The flower demon's voice was very sharp, and she was speaking the human language of the divine item continent. Ji Tianqing looked at her coldly and said with a murderous aura, even if you have the appearance of a human and mastered the human language, you're still just a cruel flower demon. You're full of evil. Since you've met us today, you'll die. Hearing his words, the flower demon suddenly raised her head and laughed. Ha 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 ha. It's so funny. The number of insects of the human race that died under my claws is at least 800, if not 1,000. At least half of them would boast shamelessly like you before making a move, bluffing and bluffing. But in the end, when they were about to die under my claws, they would be terrified and desperate to the extreme. They would kneel and beg for mercy in all kinds of ugly ways. The human race is so sad. The ugly flower demon that carried her on its shoulder couldn't help but say something. It spoke with a middle-aged man's voice and said coldly, Minglan, why are you talking nonsense with these two insects? After saying that, it waved one of its thick and solid arms and ordered the 20 over demonic beasts, kill those two worms for this monarch and tear them into pieces. The more than 20 demon beasts received the order and let out sharp roars. They rushed toward Ji Tianqing and Yunyao as fast as lightning. Swoosh! 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 The demon beasts released colorful lights, which condensed into light blades that covered the sky. They covered Ji Tianqing and Yunyao. They divided the work and cooperated with each other very well. A few demon beasts stood in the outer circle and kept releasing demon beasts, poisonous fog and venom. They attacked Ji Tianqing and Yunyao fiercely. The demon beasts, who were good at close combat, rushed forward bravely and waved their sharp claws to attack. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao were immediately surrounded. They were in danger. The ferocious cyan dragon carried the two twin flower demons on its back and stood in midair, admiring the fierce battle. Ji Tianqing was fearless. He waved the burial of heaven's sword with all his strength and used his secret sword technique to resist the attacks of the demon beasts. Yunyao also waved her sword and used her technique with a serious face. Her figure was like a graceful swan, flashing continuously in the air. Light blades and sword lights covered the sky and earth. All kinds of colorful magical lights collided fiercely. Boom boom boom. Loud noises kept echoing in the Flower Valley and didn't disappear for a long time. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.